Hi everyone, please subscribe to my channel. Blood Immortal Venerable. See playlist for other chapters and novels. I do not translate the novels. Credits goes to original translator and author of the novel. I only make it as an audiobook so it would be easier to just listen while doing other things. Credits goes to the author of the novel. I convert stories to audiobook for mental health, for multitasking purpose, for accessibility and time saving. Listening to audiobook is also beneficial for people who have disability. It improves our listening skills and improve our English comprehension, vocabulary and other things. So, thank you for listening. Thank you and thank you very much for your support. Chapter 2781, The Ripple Pavilion. Sitting quietly in his room, Zen reflected on what had happened in the mountain viewing province. Back then, he had accidentally absorbed the Shade Stone. While trying to escape Elizabeth, his body had been burned by the Sun Crow race's divine flames. While absorbing the divine flames, he also ended up absorbing the Shade Stone. This time, Zen wanted to replicate the scene. Silently, he reached out his hand to his chest, stroking it lightly. Suddenly, a flame rose from his chest. Gradually, the flames climbed over to his arms, then legs, till his whole body was consumed in flames. In the past, every time Zen absorbed some sort of flame, his body strength would grow. However, as his body continued to strengthen, he'd been unable to forge himself further with only fire. Besides, ordinary flames wouldn't do him any good, anyway. Sizzle. Zen was now at the consummation of the elementary fire godly way, but he would still cultivate it occasionally. Although the flames he materialized were not as strong as those of the warriors who specialized in flames, they weren't considered weak. In fact, they were quite powerful. Under Zen's constant activation, his body burned a bright, hot red. Finally, as the flames rose higher and higher, Zen's body began to glow a golden light. The golden light was generated from the truth of godly way hidden within his body. If the golden light kept blazing, he would soon enter the other shore. The first time he had done this, he was in the divine land. Although he was not exactly sure as to what the truth of godly way was, he stopped it before it took effect on his body. Therefore, before the flames burned too hotly, he would restrain them, so as to avoid being sent to the other shore. As the golden light was suppressed, circles of golden Sanskrit words hovered around him. One by one, they turned into little whirlpools, absorbing the flames on his body. While the flames were burning his body, Zen gently pointed at the Shade Stone liquid. It leapt into the air, landing on his shoulder. Whirl! The Shade Stone liquid started climbing down his arm. Some part of it had been sucked into the whirlpools. Last time, Zen wasn't aware that he had absorbed the Shade Stone. This time, his eyes widened in amazement as he observed the process attentively. Since I can absorb the Shade Stone, I wonder if I can absorb all kinds of things. Waving the thought away for the meantime, he resumed his focus on absorbing the Shade Stone liquid. After a few minutes, the black liquid that was crawling on his skin had disappeared. It had been completely absorbed. Zen willed the flames on the surface of his body to die down. Then, he noticed threads of black spread over his shoulder, like an intricate map. It's done. Seeing the pattern again, Zen felt a surge of joy. With a thought of his, the black map on his shoulder crawled along his ribs and towards his arm. Most of the time, Zen would store the Shade Stone in his right arm. Now, the two streams of Shade Stone liquid gathered together, forming a black mass on his arm too. Zen narrowed his eyes. He felt the other shore power from the strength god totem surging within him. 700 divine megatons. Previously, Zen's bones were shattered when challenged by 700 divine megatons of force, so this time, he tested whether he could withstand it. A terrifying other shore power began to gather in his black arm. The enormous force caused the space around Zen's right hand to warp as though he were distorting time and space. But his arm remained intact. This time, he could bear the force easily. 800 divine megatons. He tested an even heavier force. To his delight, he could bear it too. His right arm covered with the Shade Stone liquid had become an extremely strong other shore treasure. Moreover, it was stronger than ordinary other shore treasures with Zen's flesh, blood and bones as the supporting force. 900 divine megatons. 1000 divine megatons. 100 divine megatons. 200 divine megatons. The pure other shore power surged in Zen's arm. If he managed to control this power, the destruction it could cause would be unimaginable. 1000 divine megatons is the limit in the lust world, Zen thought to himself. It seems that my body can handle even more. Now, he had mastered 3 truths of godly ways. The truth of cultivation nature could integrate another kind of other shore token. The day after the Seven Mountains meeting, Zen had gone to the temple on the other shore to claim his reward, soul crystal, and his soul of light had grown again. He planned to continue to explore the other shore upon returning to the Oneness Sky Palace. The following morning, a massive drum, around 300 feet wide, appeared in the Sioux city. A man covered with copper powder stood before the drum, banging it with incredible speed. Dong, 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 the drum made a deafening noise, echoing throughout the whole Sioux city. Even people 100 miles away from the city could hear it clearly. Then, the elites of the Sioux city walked on the main street, dressed up in fancy clothing. The rally at the Ripple Pavilion was the most grand festival of the Clear Lake. Before the reign of Eastern Emperor Tai, the human race here gathered themselves around the Clear Lake. If birds and beasts came, they would scare them away with the sound of the huge drum. It's said that Eastern Emperor Tai found a handful of holy water in the Clear Lake, and took a sip. After that, he began to transform, Gant explained to Zen. Holy water, what's that? Zen asked curiously. Gant gave a small smile. The story was fabricated by later generations. The Clear Lake is so big. If the holy water truly existed, I'm sure there wouldn't just be a handful of it. Anyway, he continued, later on, the human race that surrounded the Clear Lake had become more and more prosperous. The Ripple Pavilion was built in honor of that. Dong, 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 the copper man continued beating the huge drum. Two burly men had lifted the massive drum and walked out of the Sioux city. A parade of residents of the city followed. The people of the Sioux clan stood in flying carriages, flying along with the crowd below them. The frontmost carriage had the character, Sioux, engraved on it, and it carried Kalen. Zen and Gant sat behind him, followed by several uncles of Gant. Who is the man behind the master of the Sioux clan? What did he do to deserve a seat there? I can't believe that Gant has come back. The Sioux clan was the most prominent clan in the Sioux city. The seats on the first flying carriage carried certain prestige. Zen must have been considered a distinguished guest if he was made to sit right behind Kalen. Naturally, the people were very curious about him. The parade headed for the Clear Lake. Zen drank in the scene before him. On one side of the Clear Lake, many willows lined the water, making a picturesque, peaceful scene. Along the way to the Clear Lake, people from the other surrounding cities also gathered, each with their own large drums. The drummers of the other cities beat their drums furiously, it seemed like they were competing to see who could beat it the hardest. The people cheered, making the scene very lively. Around 2 hours later, Zen saw a black line emerge in the Clear Lake. As he got closer, he found that it was a small, narrow island on the lake. The sole building on the island was a beautiful pavilion. Is this the Ripple Pavilion? Zen blinked his eyes in disappointment. Originally, he thought the Ripple Pavilion would be a magnificent building, but it turned out to be so ordinary. Chapter 2782, Marco's Strategy. The Ripple Pavilion looked ordinary, but it was regarded as the faith in the large clans around the Clear Lake. Yes, that is the Ripple Pavilion, Gant replied with a smile. Don't be fooled by its ordinary appearance. It's a very special and mysterious pavilion. Really? Why so? Zen asked curiously. Gant was silent, keeping Zen in suspense. Help us defeat them, he finally said. You'll know what's inside. The giant drums were hurled straight into the lake to form a massive platform. Dozens of people from various clans jumped on the platform. As they stepped on the drums, the lake water would burst out from the cracks in between, forming water curtains. For an onlooker, the scene looked quite magnificent. Soon, hundreds of thousands of people were gathered by the Clear Lake, applauding the water curtains. Other performers followed the drummers. Singing and dancing filled the air and entertained the audience. Zen was starting to feel impatient, but he knew he was invited by the Sioux clan and so he tried to relax. As he watched the performance, Zen suddenly felt like someone was staring at him from afar. He looked around, but didn't find anyone among the thick crowd. On the other side, an exquisite room stood on the large flying carriage of the Sioux clan. Inside it, Marco was standing by the window staring at Zen. He really did come, he snorted. Since he's here now, I assume he'll also attend the competition. It might be a bad idea to kill him in front of such a big crowd, Laszlo advised. They had spied on Zen and made sure he was in the Sioux clan's residence, and then they proceeded to discuss the plan to kill him. The simplest way was to follow Zen. As soon as he was alone, they could sneak up on him and let Marco slay him. Marco didn't like this plan. The Oneness Sky Palace was full of curious and smart onlookers. Even if they sneaked up on him, someone could still easily uncover the truth. The younger generations of the clans fight against each other at the rally. The members of the Sioux clan are just weak weapon refiners. If we suppress the Sioux clan will have no choice but to seek help from Zen. As long as he makes his first move, it will be easy, Marco said calmly. Marco did not see a real threat in Zen. As long as they were in battle, Zen's death would only be considered as fate. They could kill him in the battle ring and the Flow Sword sect could do nothing to Marco. Drystan and Grayson exchanged a meaningful look. There was a hint of worry in their eyes. They recalled the night Zen had tried to slash them. Even if he failed, they could still tell he had remarkable strength. Moreover, Zen knew that they had spied on him. It was obvious that Zen had sharp senses. However, they decided to keep their thought to themselves. They did not want to risk offending Marco's ego. He was, after all, one of the best among his peers. He was nearly at the 14th stage of the other shore realm and so he was confident that he could easily kill Zen. 4 hours had passed and the performance had finally come to a close. The master of the Shu clan took the platform. The main highlight of the gathering was the competition of the younger generation at the Ripple Pavilion. Whoever won would rule the pavilion. The previous year, the Shu clan placed first. As part of the tradition, they had the right to come to the stage and select their opponent the following year. Each clan could only send 2 members, which meant they only had 2 chances. They had to cautiously choose their opponents. This year, the Shu clan's opponent is. The master of the Shu clan looked towards the Sioux clan and continued, the Sioux clan. Kalen was stunned, and the members of the Sioux clan exchanged confused looks. The Sioux clan's disciples might not be as strong as the other clans, but they were good at weapon refining. Very few clans took them as the first target. Kalen thought the Shu clan would choose the Li clan or the Jia clan instead. Mumbled discussions filled the air as everyone exchanged speculations. The Shu clan master's face flushed in helplessness. He didn't want to choose the Sioux clan, but he was merely following Marco's orders. Marco had promised that he would personally fight in the competition, after all. He was a direct descendant of the Shu clan. He was also among the most outstanding disciples of the Oneness Sky Palace. He could easily defeat his opponents at the gathering of the Ripple Pavilion. It was rare that a clan would win the battle for 2 consecutive years, but with Marco's participation, the Shu clan was feeling confident they could win again. The master of the Shu clan announced, Morgan Shu. Fight for our Shu clan. What? Why would he send Morgan to fight at the first round? Even the other clans found the arrangement absurd. Morgan was the most powerful warrior in the younger generation of the Shu clan, and an elite disciple on the vastness mountain of the Oneness Sky Palace. The year before, Morgan's outstanding performance led to their victory. Why was he suddenly selected to fight the first round? Each clan could only send 2 people and the Shu clan was the first to fight. Putting Morgan at the earliest stage of the battle risked using up all his strength because he would have to fight again and again till the end. If he failed, the Shu clan might not have anyone stronger to fight in his place. Whoosh! From the direction of the Shu clan, a young man in white floated out. He slid on the lake and set off thick waves. The giant drums rose and fell. Dong! Morgan stood on a huge drum with an arrogant look on his face. What's so amazing about Marco? He's just from the direct line of the clan. I'll make sure to knock down each and every single opponent I encounter from start to finish to make sure he fights no one. Morgan thought. The Sioux clan that was selected as the Shu clan's opponent for the first round was in deep thought as to who to fight. After all, they were going to compete with the most powerful person in the Shu clan. Uncle, please allow me to fight. Uncle, please allow me to fight. Uncle, please allow me to fight. Irving, Osred and Nevin, the most powerful warriors in the younger generation of the Sioux clan, approached Kalen. Kalen gave it a thought. He looked at Osred and decided, Osred, go fight with Morgan. Osred was a strong disciple of the Oneness Sky Palace. Among the 3, he was the strongest. Osred shook his head and said, Uncle, let me be the second combatant. He wanted to fight, but not as the first combatant. He felt that he should be the second one to fight. Go, insisted Kalen. Many years had passed since the Sioux clan last won the gathering. In recent years, the Sioux clan only acted as a foil. This time, they had invited Zen and had sought his help. They had to make good use of him. Osred couldn't disobey Kalen's order. With sinking shoulders, he walked towards the platform. Morgan laughed at the sight of Osred. For him, he looked pathetic. I don't know why my father chose the Sioux clan as our first opponent, but I can tell your clan is very weak. Why else would they send you to fight with me? Chapter 2783, Shu clan's plan. Osred's face turned pale upon hearing those words. He had fought with Morgan 3 years ago but was defeated with only a single strike. Morgan had called him a loser and kicked him into the lake. Osred had never been so humiliated in his life. But he had been working hard these last 3 years and that motivated him to become an elite disciple. You'd be wise not to look down upon me. Things change. People change, Osred said, brimming with pride in himself. He recognized this was an opportunity to redeem himself and put his shame behind him. The smirk on Morgan's face widened. I know you have become the elite of the Azure Mountain. But as you progress, so do I, and I do it much faster. Before me, you will always be a loser. Morgan waved his hand. 6 rays of icy light burst out from behind his back, circling around him at high speed. He stamped his feet down, sinking the huge drum he stood on in the water as he rushed towards Osred. The look in Osred's eyes intensified when he faced Morgan's attack. A purple sword showed up in his hand. As a member of the Sioux clan, he owned a treasure of high grade. It was another shore treasure. As the sword was drawn, the purple light turned into countless faint snake shadows, sweeping toward Morgan. Everyone present stood in shock as the scene unfolded. On the one hand, they were surprised at Osred's progress. On the other hand, this was only the first match and it was so fierce. This was a rare occurrence at the Ripple Pavilion competition. The purple snake shadows stretched their large mouths open to swallow Morgan whole. But as they got close, the icy light surrounding Morgan charged at him. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The 6 icy rays shone with dazzling brilliance and slashed the fierce purple snake shadows with deft ease. Too weak, Morgan sneered. The 6 rays of ice radiance picked up the pace now, and like a whipping wind, struck at Osred. Did the phantom snake strike lose just like that? I can't believe my eyes. How can this be possible? Osred thought disheartened. He hadn't expected his sword skill, which he had cultivated so hard and with such care, to be defeated by Morgan with a single strike. It was a bitter pill to swallow. Morgan continued his pressure, attacking over and over as Osred gritted his teeth and leapt away, barely avoiding the attacks. He was about to find his footing again on the drum when Morgan appeared from his flank and kicked him solidly in the chest. Bang! Splash! Osred was kicked into the lake and water splashed wildly as he fell. 3 years ago I beat you with one move, and now, I have done it again. It seems that you haven't made any progress after all, loser, said Morgan, waving his hand dismissively at Osred. Hearing this seriously peeved the people of the Sioux clan and surly looks crossed their faces. He is too arrogant, please allow me to fight. Let me fight. Both Irving and Nevin were filled with fury. They wanted to soften the embarrassment and disgrace for the Sioux clan, so they immediately asked Kalen for a fight. There was no trace of emotion present on Kalen's face. He didn't understand what the Sioux clan was up to, but since they had deliberately chosen the Sioux clan as their target and even provoked them, they must have an agenda. But Kalen couldn't figure it out. He would never know their true goal was Zen. Why are you in such a hurry to fight? The Sioux clan hasn't issued another challenge, replied Kalen with composure. Only the winner had the right to challenge others. The losers had to wait for the other party to make a choice. In a situation like this, the later they fought, the better. That way, they could avoid fighting several clans in a row. That would be exhausting and so really most clans would not want to be chosen by Sioux clan. The head of the Sioux clan in Sioux City then said, Sioux clan selects Sioux clan once more. Elders of the Sioux clan, such as Reed and Reuben, suddenly stood up and glared intensely at the head of the Sioux clan. Kalen frowned, confused by their decision. He wondered what on earth the Sioux clan had done to offend the Sioux clan. The competition had only just begun, why were they already so hell-bent on knocking Sioux clan out? Marco sat by the small window, silently watching the Sioux clan's every move. He figured if they still hoped to win, they would ask Zen to help. If they didn't, Marco would have to reconsider the plan. What's the matter with the Sioux clan? There's no rivalry between us. Why are they doing this? There is little chance that our clan will enter the Ripple Pavilion. What's the use of forcing our elimination? The Sioux clan members were all confused. The Ripple Pavilion competition was a joyful event. Even the clans who usually showed hostility for one another would not go at it on this day. Till the day was over, the biggest joke would be them being forced out by the Sioux clan right from the very beginning. The Sioux clan would surely lose the respect of other clans in Sioux City. After some consideration, Kalen turned to Zen and asked with a bright smile, Zen, would you mind fighting for us, please? He wasn't hoping for Zen to help the Sioux clan enter the Ripple Pavilion. He just wanted to save their dignity. Flag Master. Gant stared at Zen with eager eyes. Zen had agreed to this before. After all, he owed them one since they helped him melt the Shade Stone. He couldn't really refuse them. Zen nodded, stood up from the seat and jumped gracefully. His figure floated past the heads of the crowd and flew towards the center of the clear lake, gently falling on one of the huge drums. Young master, he has agreed to do it. He's really in the battle ring. Everything is as expected, young master. Both Laszlo and Grayson praised Marco's brilliant idea. A faint smile flickered across Marco's face. What if Zen wins and he doesn't challenge the Shu clan? Drystan suddenly asked. Marco, Laszlo and Grayson stopped dead on hearing this. They hadn't quite considered that. It was the rule of the Ripple Pavilion competition that only the winner could challenge others. Don't worry, it's the head of the Sioux clan who issues a challenge. We'll force him to challenge us, Marco said, snickering with schemes filling his mind. Morgan stood on the huge drum, looking at Zen and feeling very proud of himself. You are not a member of the Sioux clan, are you? Asked Morgan. No, replied Zen blankly. Morgan pointed at the bank of the clear lake and continued, since you are an outsider in this, I advise you not to get involved. Just admit defeat and leave. It's not too late. Morgan was also an elite of Vastness Mountain. The people who participated in the Seven Mountains meeting were selected by Marco. Morgan was not one of those invited and so had never seen Zen in action. Zen calmly pulled out his snow sword, and replied nonchalantly, I have no intention to leave. I owe the Sioux clan a favor. I have promised to help them and I will keep that promise. Then you'll definitely regret this, said Morgan, shaking his head, not taking Zen seriously at all. In an instant the 6 icy rays behind him burst out and turned into little stars. Under the spread of the cold air, a thin layer of ice formed on the lake. Whoosh! In the blink of an eye, he was in front of Zen. Chapter 2784, Painstaking Efforts. It was Morgan's goal to challenge and face all the clans present by himself. He had realized too late that he had treated Osred a bit leniently. To intimidate his opponents, he planned to utilize fierce skills and render them too afraid to face him in combat. The best way to do this was by unleashing his best moves. Snow Track Strike. He rushed towards Zen. He had already activated his other shore token before he launched his attack. 6 rays of icy light, together with Morgan's long sword, simultaneously shot towards Zen at a tremendous speed. He estimated his strike to contain at least 200 divine megatons of force. Morgan felt confident that both his skill and power would allow him to overwhelmingly defeat Zen. Whoosh! But as he got closer and closer to Zen, he suddenly noticed something strange. Zen's stoic expression had not changed at all. His eyes were as serene as the surface of a bottomless lake. Morgan felt that Zen had not considered his attack as a serious threat. Where was Zen's confidence coming from? Quick as a flash, a strange thought invaded Morgan's mind. The next moment, he saw that Zen had lifted his long sword in a very slight motion. The snow sword collided with his sword, and deflected his sword gently to the side. He directly crashed onto Zen's shoulder. Bang! The force of his impact would have cracked a mountain had he crashed onto one. But when he came into contact with Zen, it was as if he had been slammed onto a tough stone. He was unable to even scratch Zen. As if that wasn't perplexing enough, the rebound force from Zen's shoulder hit Morgan back. He was sent flying backward, and the 6 rays of icy light had dispersed. Dong, 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 Morgan bounced on the surfaces of the giant drums, one after the other. He tried to rush to the water's surface but the water only splashed. It was futile, he ended up falling into the water himself. Such amazing power! All the masters and outstanding members of the Lu clan, the Chen clan, and the Li clan were shockingly impressed by this exhibition of power. The onlookers had no idea why the Shu clan wanted to prove that they were more powerful than the Su clan. They inferred that the Su clan might have done something that offended the Shu clan. When Zen emerged into the arena, all of them thought that the Su clan had no chance to win at that point. The Su clan's defeat in the second round would probably set a new record for the quickest elimination. No one had expected that the Su clan's invited representative would be extremely powerful. Morgan was the most powerful individual in the Shu clan's young generation. Interesting. The Shu clan wanted to utterly devastate the Su clan, but now it seems that they have dug their own grave. The Shu clan has no stronger fighter after Morgan lost this round. The Shu clan brings disgrace on themselves. Hope blossomed in the hearts of the members of the Su clan when they saw this. They had already seen Zen's capabilities in the Blue Cloud City. Although they were shocked that Zen wasn't afraid of the divine flames, they thought that he still probably wasn't as strong as the elite disciples of the Oneness Sky Palace. Osred had held Zen in high regard since a few days ago, and this made the Su clan trust more in Zen's abilities. Still, they hadn't expected that Zen would make quick work of his fight against Morgan. The Su clan were elated, while the Shu clan were downtrodden. Master, I warned you not to send Morgan to fight in the first round. You deprived yourself of a way out of this mess. Is there anyone else in our clan who can fight? Our loss is inevitable. The members of the Shu clan were not aware of Marco's plan, nor were they aware that Marco planned to fight personally. The only thing that mattered to them now was their master's ridiculous behavior. The Shu clan's master had an unreadable expression on his face. Everything went according to Marco's plans, but he had already gone too far. He had just wanted to use the Shu clan for his revenge, but now all the members were turning on the master of the Shu clan. The Shu clan's master quashed the disappointed voice in his heart and said with his life vitality, "Young Master Marco, what should we do next given that Morgan has been bested by Zen?" "Do I still have to tell you what to do?" Marco asked back. "You have to challenge the Su clan." "Challenge the Su clan? They already won against us. They have the right to challenge whoever they want. How can I challenge them?" The master of the Shu clan was pretty inconsolable. He initially thought that it was a great advantage for them to have Marco come to the Shu city, but now it seemed that it was because of Marco that they were in big trouble. The problem was, he couldn't afford to offend Marco. "Find a way for Zen to challenge the Shu clan," Marco ordered. The Shu clan's master could not continue, his eyes narrowed and twitching. "I'm not telling you a second time." Marco's tone was extremely cold. The master of the Shu clan did not dare to utter a word. Although he was the master of the Shu clan in the Shu city, he was a dispensable figure in the real Shu clan. It would cause him a great amount of suffering if he offended Marco. At that moment, Kalen's voice reverberated from a distance. "Our Su clan has chosen the Lin clan as the next opponent." A representative disciple of the Lin clan quickly flew to the platform made of drums. He was an ordinary disciple of the Golden Mountain. How could he match Zen's power? He had not even touched Zen's sleeve before he was thrown into the water of the lake. Clans of the Clear Lake could each send 2 representatives to fight. The first person who had fought with Zen was not strong enough, so Kalen chose another 3 opponents to face Zen. As with the first one, the next 3 were also thrown into the lake unceremoniously. Zen's real strength could not be gauged as he fought with such feeble opponents. The clans of the Clear Lake had a meeting among themselves when they saw the extent of Zen's abilities. "This person seems to be very powerful. I am not familiar with him, but I think he must be a descendant of someone legendary. Will he help the Su clan claim control of the Ripple Pavilion?" "That's preposterous. The other clans still haven't shown their trump cards yet." Just as Kalen was searching for another opponent for Zen, the Shu clan's master stood up and challenged him. "Hey, Kalen, why not choose my clan?" All the clan masters were confused when they heard this. Even Kalen couldn't stop a frown from forming on his face. Kalen was wary of the master of the Shu clan. Who knew what trick he might play on them? He didn't want to respond to him, so he just turned away. Just as Kalen was about to declare the next opponent, the master of the Shu clan couldn't help but leap from his seat and rush towards him. "Kalen," he appealed impudently, "we helped your clan when you were in big trouble 100 years ago. Could you do this for us this time?" His words sounded an alarm in Kalen's mind and made him even more puzzled. But in the end, Kalen decided to indulge the Shu clan's master and said, "We choose the Shu clan as our opponent." The master of the Shu clan breathed a heavy sigh of relief and thanked Kalen with clasped hands before returning to his own seat. From a luxurious room on the Shu clan's flying carriage, a blue-robed Marco flew out as a sharp arrow. In the blink of an eye, he had already stood upon the huge drum. A smile of triumph played on his lips as he glared at Zen. The moment he set eyes on Marco, Zen knew Marco was behind everything that had happened so far. Marco wanted to face Zen so badly in the battle ring that he had orchestrated such painstaking efforts. But in Zen's eyes, Marco was an idiot who would regret everything later even after all of this. Chapter 2785, The Spirit's Trinity. The Sus and the Zus all had their mouths wide open as they saw Marco stand on the huge drum. Clueless young men from the Shu clan were especially excited at the sight of Marco. "It's our young master. He is fighting Zen. Why is he fighting on our behalf?" This question was met with silence. For the Shu clan members, Marco was a legendary figure. The Ripple Pavilion seemed too little for him to still fight for it. People from the Su clan overheard the Zus discussion and finally gained clarity. Kalen frowned and rubbed his chin. "The Shu clan isn't after us. They're after Zen." Gant nodded in agreement. "The Shu clan has figured out that we will ask Flag Master for help," he said. "The Shu clan head doesn't look like he's fully on board. Perhaps he was forced to do this. Maybe Zen had offended Marco," Reuben assessed. This is not good. As a direct descendant of Vastness Mountain, Marco's strength is extraordinary, Reed lamented. It was obvious that Marco intentionally arranged everything to trick Zen into fighting him. There was something going on between them. He couldn't possibly just want to teach Zen a lesson. I'll tell the Flag Master just to admit defeat, said Gant. However, Kalen stopped him. He shook his head helplessly and said, this is already out of our hands now. It's too late for Zen to find a safe exit. Members of the other clans felt the tension as well. Since their first encounter, Marco had the urge to kill Zen. If Dorothy hadn't been around to stop him, he would have already done it. Since then, he had made sure to give Zen a hard time. Zen thought that, after being hit by Milo, Marco would have been less motivated to go on full offensive. Yet he followed him all the way to Clear Lake. You really are persistent, muttered Zen coldly. There's only one way out for my enemies, death, Marco declared arrogantly. He pulled out a long sword with 3 dots of lights floating around it. Marco found Zen to be a nuisance. He wouldn't allow his life to be dictated by him. Zen's brows furrowed, his expression sending a chill down some onlookers' backs. He found himself motivated to kill. If he did not kill this person, he would always be a trouble for him. The snow sword shook gently in Zen's hand. Flashes of light danced all over it. Marco's spirit's trinity released strong other shore power. The water level of the Clear Lake rose, and with it came the drums in the water. Marco stomped. With a loud rumble, his body disappeared. In an instant, he was floating directly above Zen. 3-colored sword radiance was slashing towards Zen's head. With a swift raise of his arm, Zen blocked the attack with his snow sword. The 2 swords collided. Speed, said Marco. Red, green, and black rays shone from his sword light. Suddenly, the red and black rays dissipated and the entire long sword turned into pure green. Then, he sped up. In a flash, Marco slashed his sword numerous times. The sword turned into swift curved lines. Anything that it touched broke into pieces. Zen gazed at the slashing of the sword with a serious face. 9 flashlight splitting swordsmanship. This cultivation method was not destructive, but it was fast. The snow sword in Zen's hand shone like a snowflake. In a matter of 3 seconds, the 2 swords collided into each other over and over again. Neither Marco nor Zen was willing to pull back. What quick strikes! Young Master is awesome. That's the speed spirit of the 3 spirits. It greatly increases speed. Zen is better, I think. He has only used the truth of godly way to block Marco's attacks. The spectators held their breath. It wasn't every day that they witnessed such an intense battle. Marco was starting to look distressed as he was constantly blocked by Zen. He already lost to Zen last time. He knew he relied on a strengthening type of other shore token, but he didn't expect him to have cultivated the 9 flashlight splitting swordsmanship. The fight lasted for half a minute. Zen was still calm and composed, while Marco started to retreat. With a soft touch on his sword blade, he declared, absorb. In an instant, the speed spirit disappeared. The green light on the long sword vanished and, in its place, stood a blood sword. With a sly smile, Marco stepped forward. His long sword emitted a red light which slashed directly towards Zen. Marco's movements were slow, but the demonic red blood sword seemed to contain some strange power. When Zen tried to block the attack with his sword, Marco's eyes shot up. His lips curved into a sinister smile. Stupid, he murmured. The 2 swords met. Then, to Zen's surprise, the other shore power in his sword faded quickly. Marco's red long sword was like a black hole, constantly absorbing his power. This is. Zen's eyes widened as he drew his sword away. 9 flashlight splitting swordsmanship. Rays of white light dashed quickly towards Marco again in full speed. He was trying to force Marco to back away. However, Marco stood his ground unfazed. He was determined to maintain his proximity with Zen. Zen's sword radiance was quick, but Marco's long sword acted as a shield. All of Zen's attacks were effectively blocked. Apart from that, the long sword also weakened Zen's other shore power. Every time their swords touched, Zen's sword weakened. Young Master is using absorption spirit. It can directly absorb the other shore power of the opponent. Doesn't that make him invincible? People in the audience began to speculate. The spirit's trinity was one of the best other shore tokens in the Lust world. It was also one of the rarest. Zen was definitely on the losing end. A round of intense attacks did not break Marco's defenses. Instead, Zen's other shower power had weakened immensely. In desperation, Zen flew away. He wanted to be as far away from Marco as possible. However, Marco remained strong and motivated. He was definitely not going to let Zen escape that easily. Chapter 2786, Offer your life to my sword. Don't even think of leaving. Marco had started running after Zen had, but he soon appeared before Zen, sword held aloft in his hand. If Zen tried to dodge him, he'd probably be struck down into two halves by the sword. He frowned and looked around. He bent down, bunching his body into as small a ball as possible, and managed to escape from the narrow sliver of space he had been left, just barely avoiding the sword. But Marco landed a kick to his abdomen just as he had thought he had dodged it. Zen let out a loud, oof, as he landed on the huge drum, bouncing several times and making it rumble. The members of the Shu clan began to cheer loudly. They had no idea what had happened before, nor did they care. All they knew was that Marco represented them and their Shu clan. In an exquisite room in the flying carriage of Shu clan, Laszlo, Grayson, and Drystan watched the battle on the huge drums, rendered unmoving by the intensity of their interest. Young Master Marco is better than we thought. He was never bad. He's using the Spirit's Trinity, which makes him much more powerful than others from the same stage as him. I just don't understand why he had to travel all this way to kill this guy. He could have just assigned this task to the intelligence agency. It would have been a piece of cake for us. The three of them had been concerned about Marco, but watching him fight had filled them with relief. Zen got back to his feet, but Marco had launched another sword attack before he could steady himself. Zen raised his sword to defend himself, but his power was absorbed by Marco's sword attack. Again. As all the strength left Zen's arm, Marco brought his sword down on Zen's neck. But Zen, sensing the danger, swiftly leaned backwards and avoided the power of the sword's slash. Like before, just as Zen dodged the sword attack, Marco forcefully elbowed him off. Zen landed some distance away on the drum with a loud thud. Zen seemed quite defenseless against Marco. What happened to the guy from the Seven Mountains meeting? Marco mocked Zen. Zen got to his feet again. He stretched out his arms, raised two fingers, and said, 200 divine megatons. What? Marco was confused at Zen's reaction. There's a limit to the other shore power that you can absorb, Zen said calmly. The maximum you can absorb is a mere 200 divine megatons. Absorbing other people's power for one's own use was a powerful ability. Zen could do the same in the divine land, and that made him almost invincible. Zen had become very cautious after noticing Marco's abilities. If he lost all his other shore power to Marco, the defeat would be his destiny. So Zen had carefully released his power, little by little. He had lost 200 divine megatons of other shore power before realizing that that was the maximum that Marco could take. A mere 200 divine megatons of other shore power meant nothing to Zen. A mere 200 divine megatons. Marco repeated Zen's words subconsciously, and on realizing what they meant, a kind of ferocity overtook him. He raised his long sword, on which were crisscrossed red and green lights, and took off towards Zen like a heavy gust of wind. The two lights were from the Speed Spirit and the Absorption Spirit that were working in tandem with each other. The Spirit's Trinity contained 300 divine megatons of other shore power. All three spirits could grow by themselves. When he had first obtained the Spirit's Trinity, the Absorption Spirit had only been able to draw 20 divine megatons of force from the opponent. But now, the number had increased tenfold to an astonishing 200. Combined with the original 300 divine megatons of force within the Spirit's Trinity, there was now a total of 500 divine megatons of force at Marco's disposal. With the speed of his attack boosted by the Speed Spirit, nobody in the same stage within the Lust world could match him. Only Milo from the Flow Sword sect had been able to dazzle Marco with his mysterious way of attack. But he might be able to defeat him if they had a fight on the battle ring openly. Zen stood still as Marco rushed toward him. Zen's right arm was covered with the Shade Stone liquid while the Strength God Totem started to form its power. He then slashed his snow sword through the air. The once dexterous sword grew heavier and heavier as the other shore power amassed within it. The space around Zen's right arm began to twist, causing the huge drum beneath his feet to rumble. The clear lake behind him was trembling, setting off rhythmic waves of water. Since you're determined to die, offer your life to my sword. Zen was ready to strike a deadly blow at Marco, the power able enough to cut through heaven and earth. Even time seemed to freeze. This was the first time that Zen was using the Strength God Totem against an enemy. Marco had been confident of winning, for he had the boost from the Speed Spirit and the Absorption Spirit. But he had just begun to rush towards Zen when he felt a strong other shore power. Impossible. Marco's eyes widened in disbelief and shock. He had drawn 200 divine megatons of other shore power from Zen. How could Zen still have such a terrifying power remaining within him? He might have over 1,000 divine megatons. But Zen had never accepted the chaotic source reinforcement. How was he doing that? Marco had no time to retreat. Dang it! The master of the Shu clan leapt to his feet, fear written all over his face. The power that Zen had unleashed was beyond everyone's expectations. The masters of the Li clan and the Lin clan were shocked too. But since they weren't in any way involved in this battle, all they had to do was sit and watch, irrespective of what happened in the battle. If Marco were to die here, how could the Shu clan bear the anger that was sure to come their way from the vastness mountain? It was too late to stop Zen. Stop, how dare you? Grayson, Laszlo, and Drystan were even more anxious than the master of the Shu clan. They hadn't done anything so far because they had thought Marco had it under control. None of them had seen this coming. They shot out of the room like bullets, shredding the room into pieces. They were still halfway to where Zen and Marco were fighting, when a loud bang sounded from the giant drums. Zen bobbed in the air, the huge drum under his feet having been turned to dust. Marco crashed into the clear lake, causing a wave of more than 1,000 feet high to rise. Is he still alive? Zen's eyes narrowed since he hadn't yet seen Marco's body. His sword slash had been partly shielded by a yellow diamond-shaped light curtain derived from Marco's latent theurgy. Zen was determined to kill Marco. He wasn't about to ever let him go. He shot towards the lake, moving so fast, it looked like he had just disappeared from where he had hovered over the drums. But Laszlo caught up with him. How dare you attack our young master? You're courting death. A deadly energy rose from Laszlo's hand as he charged towards Zen. As a powerful warrior who had surpassed the lust world, Laszlo saw Zen as a little boy who could be easily taken care of. However, Laszlo was silently cursing Marco. He could have sent someone for Zen. But he had insisted on killing Zen himself and was now in serious trouble. If anything happened to him, the three of them would be buried alongside him. Laszlo had thought dispatching Zen was an easy task, but a sudden, inexplicable sense of fear struck him. Chapter 2787, An Unexpected Attack. The Oneness Sky Palace was unique among the forces. It was different from groups such as the Nine Li race and the Bering race. The Nine Li race and the Bering race were comprised of people descended from the same bloodlines, sharing a common genetic ancestry. In contrast, the Oneness Sky Palace included people that came from different backgrounds. At any given moment, the Oneness Sky Palace had a mixed group of members from all around the world. Thus the Oneness Mountain, the Origin Mountain, and the Vastness Mountain each had their own elite and diverse forces. The Vastness Mountain had secretly established its own intelligence agency. The covert organization was notorious among the few who had heard of it for its cruel rules and rigid practices. As a member of the Vastness Mountain's intelligence agency, Laszlo was always dealing with various problems. Just now, he was intensely worried about the consequences of Marco's death. Laszlo feared that he was about to face one of the most cruel punishments in the history of the intelligence agency. He had once seen a fellow agent receive an extreme penalty, and even now the image of his colleague's punishment lingered in his consciousness, haunting his thoughts. He couldn't stop thinking about it. If Marco was dead, Laszlo knew he would be taken to the agency's infamous penalty room. He could just imagine what would be waiting for him there. He envisioned a teeming, countless horde of purple-brown soul-devouring bugs swarming towards him in every direction, until he was surrounded. Laszlo was overcome with terror. Meanwhile, Zen's mind was flooded with a rush of ideas, coming to him one after another. These three warriors all had a much stronger aura than Marco. They might be strong martial artists who had surpassed the lust world. Zen realized that he had no chance of winning a head-to-head battle. Therefore, he had to launch a sneak attack. He had to take him by surprise. Without further ado, Zen immediately summoned the demonic eye. There was a wave of energy as Zen waved his arm. He had released a messy, powerful truth aura that rushed headlong towards Laszlo. The sword texture technique was lethal, but it was a bit troublesome to use compared to other theurgies, because the user had to envelop the target completely within their truth aura. But no opponent would be foolish enough to stand passively within an aura without trying to escape. Fortunately, Zen's demonic eye could serve as a temporary distraction, capturing the attention of his opponent. Once Laszlo was entirely cocooned within the truth aura, Zen leaned forward, searching for an opportunity. But as he looked at Laszlo, Zen's expression changed. Is his body flawless? Zen murmured to himself, frowning. In his field of vision, Laszlo's body was smooth and unlined, an integral whole. How was this possible? Zen had repeatedly tested the sword texture technique, so he knew that nothing was fully perfect. Everything had at least a couple of flaws, no matter how minor. But there was no time to dwell on such thoughts. Zen quickly adjusted his tactics, using the second ability of the demonic eye. The authentic visual world. A spark of white light flashed in Zen's right eye. Everything around him seemed to become clearer, more focused. Everything he saw was real. He could spot the smallest details even from a distance. There, I see it, he exclaimed. Indeed, Zen could see something with his right eye, but what he saw was quite strange. Laszlo's hands and legs were still flawless, but there were lines in his chest, neck, and head, running across his body and crisscrossing one another on one side of his head. Here it is, he shouted. He rose up and launched his attack. The snow sword, like a viper coming out of its hole, soared through the air towards the junction of lines on the side of Laszlo's head. Laszlo was a strong warrior beyond the lust world. Although he had yet to complete the chaotic source reinforcement, he was already far stronger than the ordinary warriors of the other shore realm in both soul and body. It could be said that he was a mere half-step from the chaotic source realm. Despite his strength, Laszlo had been so worried about Marco's life that he had become careless and distracted, focused on his fear instead of on his more immediate problems. However, within a few seconds, he snapped out of the fog of fear and recovered his senses. He instantly took stock of the situation, and was shocked at the direction of Zen's attack. He realized that Zen was aiming straight for the most vulnerable section of his body. Laszlo was stunned. Only his neck and head hadn't undergone the chaotic source reinforcement, but how could Zen know that at a glance? How dare you? Laszlo moved like lightning. He turned to his side to avoid the radiant snow sword shooting straight towards him. At the same time, he leapt forward and lashed out with his right hand, grabbing Zen's right arm forcefully. Zen had not expected the counterattack, and he found his arm caught firmly in Laszlo's grip. Laszlo let out a sigh of relief. Zen is just a junior in the lust world. Why does it feel like I'm in a life and death battle with him? He thought. Laszlo prepared to launch his vicious death aura, an attack that would melt Zen's arm and likely kill him. However, a powerful force emanated suddenly from Zen, right where Laszlo was gripping him. You want to struggle? Laszlo said coldly. He smiled and released the black death aura. The wave of killing energy instantly covered Zen's whole arm. Virtually all creatures, including the strongest warriors who had undergone the chaotic source reinforcement, would be helpless against the black death aura. Contact with it caused the victim to wither and collapse immediately. Laszlo anticipated Zen's cries of pain as his arm shrunk and withered before him. To his shock, Zen did not seem like he was in any kind of pain. Instead, his arm turned dark. What is this? Laszlo demanded, looking dumbfounded. He looked up from the dark arm to see that Zen looked calm and unafraid of his death aura. As Laszlo stared, a huge force of cold light burst towards him, heading straight for his head. He was forced to let go of Zen's arm. Laszlo tried to dodge the attack, but it was already too late. The cold light went straight through the junction of the lines. The next moment, Laszlo's head and chest cracked. A powerful force penetrated through him and his soul was smashed into pieces. There was a terrible sound of bones cracking and splitting. Laszlo's severed head still had its mouth open in shock. His headless body tumbled backwards into the water. Hundreds of thousands of people by the clear lake witnessed what had happened. The clan masters were not strong, but they were smart enough to recognize strength in others. As soon as Laszlo, Grayson and Drystan had appeared, they could tell that the three of them were incredibly strong, and close to breaking through to the chaotic source realm. The chaotic source realm allowed warriors to upgrade their souls and exceed the limits of their body's physical strength. Those who had reached the chaotic source realm were thus far more powerful than even the strongest warriors of the other shore realm in the lust world. Yet, in front of so many people, Zen had managed to defeat Laszlo. There was no sound except the wind. Everyone was deathly silent, waiting to see what would happen next. The master of the Shu clan was white-faced, looking at Zen blankly. He couldn't help but think that he should stop Zen. If he had acted rashly, however, Zen would have killed him with a single blow. Kalen was looking back and forth between Zen and the pool of blood spreading on the lake from Laszlo's body, unable to speak. He was stunned. He had seen Zen's strength firsthand back in Blue Cloud City. At that time, Zen had just reached the other shore realm, and Kalen had been highly impressed when he saw how much stronger Zen was compared to the other warriors in that realm. He thought he knew what Zen was capable of. But this was even more incredible. In the span of just a few months, Zen had somehow gained the power and ability to defeat a person who was on the verge of entering the chaotic source realm. Kalen kept in close touch with many contacts at the Oneness Sky Palace, so he was familiar with stories of the outstanding talents there. Yet he had never heard of a warrior who had reached such heights as Zen. Father, did you know about this? My flag master is so powerful. He has not stayed long at the mountain, but he has already made great progress. Gant whispered excitedly. All around, people were recovering from their initial astonishment, and beginning to murmur and whisper to each other. Kalen said nothing. He was frowning, unable to conceal his worries. He had allowed Gant to follow Zen because he thought highly of him. If Zen continued to succeed, Gant would also reap the benefits. He realized now that Zen's talent was far beyond his greatest expectations. Warriors like Zen attracted enemies and rivals. Moreover, Zen had already offended the Shu clan on the Vastness Mountain. However, Kalen decided not to share his concerns with his son. After all, Zen had been a helpful ally to his own clan. He just hoped his son wouldn't be endangered by his continued association with a warrior as powerful as Zen. Laszlo. Oh no. When Laszlo, Grayson, and Drystan had rushed out, Laszlo had confronted Zen while Grayson and Drystan rushed to check on Marco. It turned out that Marco had survived Zen's sword strike. Somehow, despite his severe injuries, he was still breathing. He was saved by the latent Thurgy. But before they could even give voice to their relief, Grayson and Drystan had turned to see Laszlo being killed by Zen. As they watched, Laszlo lost his head, and his body fell into the clear lake. A spreading pool of crimson blood marked the spot where Laszlo had fallen. They instantly forgot about their relief at Marco's survival. Instead, a sudden and fierce rage rose inside them. They focused on Zen, Laszlo's killer, their faces flushed with anger. Chapter 2788, Sun Fiend Wheel. Grayson rubbed his eyes hard in disbelief, his heart seeming to have stopped. He couldn't move. He stared in shock at the blood spreading across the water. It was true, this was reality. Laszlo, his elder brother, who had been talking happily with him and Drystan a moment ago, was now dead. What's wrong? Marco asked in a weak voice, floating on the surface of the water. He was trembling terribly. Laszlo is dead. He was killed by that guy. Grayson said furiously, his face menacing. Marco was stunned for a second. He couldn't believe what he just heard. It's impossible. I will avenge my brother. Drystan jumped out of the water surface, and an impossibly huge wheel appeared on his back. The wheel started emitting a dazzling light, so bright it was almost impossible to look directly at it. At the same time, a golden copper stick suddenly appeared in his hand. Sun Fiend Wheel. Spin. Under Drystan's command, the wheel rapidly spun on its own. After a while, it finally stopped. The wheel had 6 different patterns. A totem like a fiend statue stopped above Drystan's head when it was done spinning. In the blink of an eye, the aura enveloping his entire body changed immensely. It was like he was possessed by a fiend, slowly becoming evil and powerful. The Sun Fiend Wheel was a special kind of Other Shore token within Stage 14 of the Other Shore. It had a total of 6 different forms. Every time it was activated, the chosen form would possess the warrior's body. Some forms were powerful enough to make the warrior become indestructible, while others were only supportive. Whether the opponent would encounter a powerful form or a weak one from the wheel, it was entirely up to their luck. You are unlucky. Perhaps my brother's still protecting me. This is my most powerful form. 3 sharp horns suddenly appeared on Drystan's head, growing slowly to their full lengths. Then blood vessels in his entire body started becoming visible, emitting a bright red light. Zen stood unmoving on the surface of the water, his eyes narrowed slightly, assessing the situation. He released his truth aura quietly and unnoticed. Even though he had already killed Laszlo, he couldn't let his guard down even for just a second. Zen had been able to kill Laszlo because he caught him off guard. On the other hand, Drystan and Grayson had already surpassed the Lust World, and their strength shouldn't be underestimated. As Drystan swung his long stick in a swift long arc, more than 100 brisk water tornadoes rose on the surface of the lake. The long stick abruptly stopped on its movement, and all the water tornadoes were split in half in an instant. Countless splashes of water wound around him, covering his entirety. When the splashes dissipated, Drystan was gone. Zen stared vigilantly ahead, keeping his senses alert as he looked for any trace of Drystan. He suddenly felt a stirring of space fluctuation from behind him. He is behind me. But before Zen could turn even his head, there was already a whistling sound and a loud crack as the stick struck his back with a powerful blow. Die. With his current physical body, at most Drystan could withstand a force of 600 to 700 divine megatons. However, after the fiend in the Sun Fiend Wheel possessed his body, there was an apparent increase in his physical strength. The stick he was carrying might unleash a force of 1,000 divine megatons. If it struck any other shore realm cultivator, their internal organs would turn into pieces and their body would probably be cut in 2 by the stick. Even Zen was unable to withstand and counter its attack. Shade Stone. Zen tried his best with his remaining strength to mobilize the Shade Stone liquid to accumulate on his back. His back turned dark in an instant. The Shade Stone liquid not only protected his spine, but also his ribs and internal organs, keeping them all in place. However, the impact was still as powerful as Zen had predicted. Zen fell like a heavy meteor, smashing into the mud at the bottom of the clear lake. The massive lake water was squeezed and spread around. The water turned into a huge wave over 1,000 feet high, shadowing over everything and everyone around the lake. Many onlookers fled, while the top warriors of the clans living around Clear Lake moved to do something to stop the huge waves from crossing the shore. Drystan held the long stick tightly, his anger as disturbed as the water below. He looked solemnly at the bottom of the lake, the point where Zen fell terribly. When he could finally see Zen clearly from below, he was surprised. Zen should have been turned into ashes after receiving such an overwhelming attack. Instead, he seemed unharmed. What kind of monster was he? A moment ago, Drystan couldn't understand how Laszlo had died at Zen's hands. He estimated that Zen wasn't all that powerful from the way he looked. But now, it was clear and he understood. Zen slowly rose from the mud almost immediately after his fall, and he looked completely unscathed. The heads of the clans stared at him in shock. They believed that the attack from Drystan carried a force of at least 800 divine megatons. But Zen seemed to have suffered no injury from it. Was he even a human? It was proven difficult even for the innate strong creatures from Cyan Scale Race or Huge Crab Race to do that. Let's see how long you can keep up. Hate filled Drystan's eyes as he disappeared once again from his position. The competition in Vastness Mountain's intelligence agency was extremely cruel. The reason Drystan and Grayson were able to achieve what they were today was because of Laszlo's wisdom. The three brothers loved and looked out for each other. And now that Laszlo was dead, Drystan and Grayson both went mad with fury, wreaking havoc. Once again, Drystan appeared behind Zen out of thin air. His stick came crashing down towards him, more powerful than the previous one. But this time, Zen was prepared. He whipped around in the air as soon as he could feel Drystan and dodged away by a hair's breadth. At the same time, a white light flashed in his right eye. Drystan's chaotic source reinforcement wasn't as powerful as Laszlo's, but thanks to the fiend form of the Sun Fiend Wheel, his body had become stronger with fewer physical defects. Zen's body shuttled through the shadows of Drystan's stick, his eyes firmly staring at Drystan, watching out for his next move. Under the fury in his heart, Drystan gave Zen a swift sweep. However, when he was stared at directly like this by Zen, he actually felt a little scared. Shadowless broken sticks. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The endless stick shadows surrounded Zen, and almost each of them charged at his vital parts at the same time, making it harder to dodge. At this time, the white light in Zen's eye flashed more dangerously, and Drystan trembled. When people were angry, they could overcome fear and rise more powerful than before. The death of Laszlo infuriated Drystan greatly. The effect of the demonic eye on him was reduced significantly. But life and death could be decided in a second in a fight between powerhouses. Drystan was caught in fright for only the blink of an eye. But that was long enough for Zen, who had been watching him intently, to find his weakness. Finally, I can see it clearly. It's in his chest. With only his target in mind, Zen swung his sword with minimal power. He didn't have to use much strength. That attack carried only a force of 50 to 60 divine megatons. If the sword had stabbed other parts of Drystan's body, it wouldn't even be able to break the protection of his fiend form. But Zen saw it. 2 inches to the right corner of his chest was Drystan's biggest weakness. 3 cracks started spreading down his chest, 2 downwards and another upward. Slowly, as the cracks extended throughout his body, Drystan's whole form turned into tiny little pieces like a broken porcelain. As Zen raised his hand gently, the sword radiance rushed out and charged at Drystan. When his body was successfully broken, his soul was destroyed by the sword radiance with a final strike. Chapter 2789, Serious Trouble. Warriors from the Sioux City and Shu City gradually felt the gravity of the situation. Horror filled their minds. The Sioux clan was the weakest among all clans around the Clear Lake. They only majored in weapon refining, which had no high requirement in terms of cultivation base. But the heads of the Shu clan, Li clan, Zhao clan and others were all at the peak of Lust World. Some of them had even crossed the Lust World and reached the threshold of the Chaotic Source Realm. They knew exactly how powerful warriors at the Chaotic Source Realm were. The realm was the first limit that many of them would physically encounter. Laszlo was a mere half step from the Chaotic Source Realm, while Drystan was also close to the realm. But just within a few minutes, Zen had killed both of them. This was an unthinkable turn of events for many of them. The head of the Shu clan was at first motivated to stop Zen. He was even willing to kill him if he had to. But this motivation was replaced by fear as soon as he saw Drystan get killed. He halted in midair and slowly backed away from Zen. He knew he was no match for Zen, but he also knew that he shouldn't just let Marco die at the hands of Zen. He was in a dilemma: should he try to counter Zen's attacks or flee to safety? As soon as he killed Drystan, Zen no longer had any hesitation in him. He flew swiftly like a big hawk and went straight to Marco. Marco only had Grayson for a guard. And Grayson was the weakest among the three. It was a good thing that he had his other sure token, the spying mirror, with him. With it, he was able to detect his opponents in secret. "You brat, I'll fight you to death." Grayson's eyes opened wide with fury. A small mirror appeared above his head. A beam of radiance shot out of the mirror's surface. It went straight towards Zen. Phew, Zen was able to dodge it at the last second. He focused on reaching Grayson all while avoiding the light. The long sword in his hand left a long trail in the air. Crack, Zen couldn't even be bothered to use the sword texture technique as well as the demonic eye. Instead, a silver light beamed in the air and pierced right through Grayson. It sliced him from top to bottom and cut him in half. Finally, the all of the three were gone. With Grayson out of the way, Zen and Marco were finally looking at each other eye to eye. Marco was still lying on the waters, protected by the diamond-shaped light curtain. Above him hovered Zen, gazing at him coldly. Just a few moments earlier, Zen launched an all-out attack. Marco ended up badly injured, with only the light curtain to protect him. The latent Thurgy had saved his life once, but it wasn't going to save him each time. With Laszlo, Drystan, and Grayson dead, he no longer had anyone that could save him from Zen. Marco's eyes filled with fear as Zen loomed overhead. He stared at Zen with his remaining energy and, with a trembling voice, declared, "You can't kill me. You tried to kill me more than once," Zen said with gaze so piercing it would make anyone shiver. "But I failed every time." "You survived," Marco retorted desperately. "I survived," Zen laughed. A mocking smile appeared on his face. The moment of their first encounter in the temple, Marco had already attempted to kill Zen. During their second encounter at the Seven Mountains meeting, Marco barely held himself back. The third time, he rushed into the Flow Sword sect to challenge Zen. Now, they were face to face once more. If Zen let him go, there would be no assurance that Marco would give up. "If you kill me now, you will regret it. People of the Vastness Mountain will not let you off, neither will my father." Marco resorted to using his status and identity as a way out. He knew begging Zen and enticing pity out of him was useless. He knew that no ordinary disciple of the Flow Sword sect would dare offend the Vastness Mountain, one of the 7 mountains in the Oneness Sky Palace. Suddenly, the head of the Shu clan and Kalen arrived. "Young man, I implore you to think about what you're about to do," the head of the Shu clan persuaded. "His death would cause the entire Oneness Sky Palace to go into chaos. There will be no place for you in the palace." He turned to wink at Kalen. Kalen had never intended to get involved in this matter at all, but he wanted to maintain their clan's close relationship with the Shu clan, and the Shu clan had asked for his intervention. Kalen also agreed that Zen should not kill Marco. Unlike these declining clans around the Clear Lake, the Vastness Mountain was a great power that Zen couldn't afford to offend. "Zen, they're right. Please think twice before you kill a direct descendant of the Vastness Mountain," Kalen pointed out. Zen turned to look at them both. "So what do I do? Not fight back and pretend he hasn't repeatedly attempted to kill me? Are we going to allow this power play just because I was born inferior?" But, the head of the Shu clan stammered through a response. He knew Zen was right. "He's not the first of his kind to have given me threats, nor will he be the last," Zen said calmly. Then, he turned towards Marco and swung his sword at him. The light curtain created by the latent Thurgy was about to collapse. Zen's attack weakened the shield and cut Marco's head. Marco opened his mouth to plead more, but it was too late. Splash! His dead body fell and floated into the water. "Oh no, this is going to be a serious trouble for all of us," the head of the Shu clan exclaimed. Marco's presence was a big honor to their clan, but now he was killed before his own eyes. How was he going to explain to the Vastness Mountain? Kalen's eyelids widened. Anxiety filled his heart. He knew that what Zen did was impulsive and reckless, but at the back of his mind he felt deep admiration. Zen had once more proven how extraordinary he was. If he continued growing, he would end up as a legendary figure. Swoosh, swoosh, Swoosh! Many warriors of Shu clan who witnessed the murder flew into the air to approach Zen. Not everyone was well aware of what was truly happening. All they cared about was that Marco was a member of the Shu clan. They would not allow Zen to escape their sight. Zen was strong, but the members of the Shu clan outnumbered him. They were confident they'd win against a single person. Zen narrowed his eyes and placed his long sword horizontally across his chest. "Anyone who stands in my way will die," he warned. As he spoke, a white light flashed across his right eye. The warriors floating above the clear lake felt shivers go down their spines. With fearful gazes, they stared at Zen. "Let him go," said the head of the Shu clan in an exhausted voice. He knew that Zen could easily escape their hands. He didn't want to risk any more lives just to stop him from leaving. He wanted to act smarter. Zen returned to the Shu clan's crowd. The blank faces of Reuben, Reed, and all the others welcomed him. The Shu clan knew they were in big trouble if they were to be implicated. Only Gant stepped forward with a look of admiration on his face. "Flag Master, you truly are formidable," he praised. Zen patted his shoulder. "I killed Marco. Aren't you afraid of being implicated?" Kalen and all the others were cursing Gant in their minds. All they wanted was to disassociate from Zen. Afraid of being implicated, Gant raised his brows. There must be several thousand direct descendants in the 7 mountains, but there are only a dozen of disciples capable of instant enlightenment as you are. I highly doubt they'd do anything against you, Flag Master. Chapter 2790, Slaps. An uncomfortable silence hung in the air after Gant said those words to Zen. Zen was a talented warrior who was capable of instant enlightenment. Moreover, he had Athamar's support. That being said, this made it difficult for the people of the Vastness Mountain to get back at Zen. Of course, Gant was aware that his clan was trying to be cautious. After all, the Shu clan was but a weapon-refining clan. They bore little to no importance to the Oneness Sky Palace. They couldn't afford to provoke the people of the Vastness Mountain. Gant surveyed the elders before him. They, as well as the other people of the Shu clan, all looked quite surprised. The people started to whisper amongst themselves. Zen is capable of instant enlightenment. Only 14 people could do that in the history of the Oneness Sky Palace. No wonder Zen was so confident and did not hesitate to kill Marco. Fine, Zen said quietly. He knew Gant was constantly trying to please him. Now, do we still need to continue fighting? Zen took a look at his surroundings. His battle with Marco dealt a lot of damage to the battle ring. Huge cracks dotted the drums. The other clans like the Li clan and the Zhao clan were also quiet. They were unwilling to fight because they knew very well that none of their young warriors could match Zen's strength. Also, the battle that just took place was truly gruesome. None of the clans was in the mood to compete with each other. All the clan masters gathered together to discuss. Finally, they decided that the Shu clan should take control of the Ripple Pavilion. And with that, the gathering at the Ripple Pavilion came to an end. Despite everything that happened, Zen ended up helping the Shu clan reach their goal. He owed them nothing. Zen packed up and left with Gant. Kalen watched their receding figures. He was a little worried about Gant, but he dared not say anything in front of Zen. After leaving the Shu city, Zen and Gant decided to walk westward, along the clear lake. Although much had happened in the competition this year, the gathering at the Ripple Pavilion pushed through, unaffected. Throngs of people talked excitedly amongst themselves by the banks of the clear lake. Many couldn't get over Zen's heroic stunt today. In their eyes, the battles between Zen and Marco, Zen and the 3 brothers were the highlight, despite many other battles not even having taken place yet. Flag Master, Trish is your maid, but she is too unruly, Gant complained. She should have come back when the Ripple Pavilion rally began, but she didn't, Gant huffed indignantly while trailing closely behind Zen. The day after Zen arrived at the Shu clan's mansion, Trish asked if she could leave for a while. She had wanted to go back home. This was why she came to the clear lake with Zen. However, she hadn't come back yet. Gant decided to take Zen to the Yanjiao city to look for her. In the Yanjiao city lived 2 big clans, the Yan clan and the Zhao clan. However, over time, the Yan clan grew weak, and gradually deteriorated. Consequently, the Zhao clan took full control of the city. During this time of festivities, the Yanjiao city was brightly lit with colorful lanterns tied to the roofs of the buildings. However, the cheery festivities ended at the northwest corner where a dilapidated house sat. This was the Yan clan's ancestral home. Meanwhile, from the backyard of the Yan clan's house, Trish gritted her teeth as she tried to search for a way out. She had promised to go back to the Shu clan's mansion today to meet Zen, but now she was trapped in her own house. Many times she attempted to climb over the courtyard wall, but every time her fingers touched the bricks, a ray of dark, scarlet blood light would shoot at her. She turned a somersault and fell to the ground. Trish, just quit, a voice came from within the house. This enchanted barrier was personally set up by the Zhao clan. It's impossible to get out. From the shadows, Trish's stepmother emerged. How could you treat me like this? I have given you many divine crystals. Trish spat with resentment. Her stepmother shrugged. To rebuild our clan, the divine crystals you earn are far from enough. She smiled in a sinister manner. If you marry into the Zhao clan, they may help us. How can you possibly think that? That's just wishful thinking. Lachlan is a playboy. I would rather die than marry him, Trish said, unable to fight back the tears from streaming down her face. She had done so much for her family, but her stepmother was trying to force her to marry into the Zhao clan. Her heart broke. The Yan clan had also been influential in the past. However, 20 years ago, the elders of the Yan clan had all passed away. This left only a group of women and children to fend for themselves, with no one to rely on. While their power declined over the years, the Zhao clan's influence increased rapidly. Gradually, they took over the business of the Yan clan, eventually taking over the whole city. Don't make things difficult for me, her stepmother replied unsympathetically. Young Master Lachlan will come to pick you up tonight. You can't go anywhere else today. As she spoke, she heard the floorboards in the house creak with footsteps. A man garbed in white emerged, followed by a few servants dressed in black. Young Master Lachlan, you're here. Is the Clear Lake bustling? Hee. Trish's stepmother attempted to greet him with an ingratiating smile. Of course it's bustling, Lachlan said indifferently. Lachlan wasn't an ambitious man. He wasn't strong enough to fight for the Zhao clan at the gathering. Moreover, with the great accident that happened earlier today, the battles had come to a hasty end. After the curt greetings, Trish's stepmother led Lachlan to the backyard, where Trish sat, seething. Lachlan's eyes lit up the moment he saw Trish. With a grin, he said, Trish, I haven't seen you in years. You grow more and more beautiful each time I see you. It seems that the Oneness Sky Palace treats you well. He stepped forward and gently touched Trish's face. Slap. Without a word, Trish had slapped his hand away, her eyes brimming with anger. Lachlan looked back at Trish's stepmother with surprise. Have you made everything clear to her? Yes, I have told her everything, Trish's stepmother said, beaming. Trish, don't worry, young Master Lachlan will treat you well after you become his concubine. Listen, Trish said coldly, I came back with my master this time. You can't afford to offend him. If, Trish, her stepmother sneered, do you really want to be a maid for the rest of your life? Lachlan frowned scornfully. Your master is just a disciple from the Oneness Sky Palace. Do you really think he can beat my clansmen? Even if he were to visit me in my house, I wouldn't be afraid of him. He waved his hand with disdain and said, tie her up and take her back. I will teach her a lesson once we get back. The servants gave a curt nod and then walked towards Trish. Trish's eyes darted back and forth between the servants approaching her. In her desperation, she took a few steps back and leaned against the wall. Suddenly, she felt her hand grow warm. It felt as though a force was controlling her arm. As the first servant finally reached her, the next thing she knew was her hand suddenly flailed forward. Slap. The servant in the front flew more than 100 feet away at the impact of Trish's slap. When the others saw this, they froze. Lachlan was also stunned. Are you all cowards? Get her. The servants summoned up courage and rushed at Trish again, this time more fiercely determined. Trish felt like a god was helping her. She lunged forward suddenly, her hands flailing uncontrollably. Yet, she managed to hit the servants square in the face, sending them flying. Slap, 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 crisp slaps were heard one after another. After a while, all the servants lay unconscious on the ground. Trish looked at her hands in shock. Lachlan narrowed his eyes. He felt something strange, like an invisible force was running around the courtyard. Who is it? Who is there? Get out. Chapter 2791, Making Trouble. No one responded to Lachlan. Trish and her stepmother also looked around the courtyard with puzzled looks. Who are you? How dare you cause me trouble in the Yanjiao city? Lachlan continued, raising his voice. You must have a death wish. The whole Yanjiao city was under the rule of the Zhao clan. Everyone, no matter how influential they were, had to show their respect to the Zhao clan if they passed by the city. This would explain why Lachlan was so indignant. Show your. Before he could finish his words, Trish let out a panicked scream. Lachlan whipped his head around in time to see her rushing towards him at an inhuman speed. It was as though her entire body was enveloped in some invisible force. Before he had the time to react, Trish raised her hand and slapped him full in the face. How dare you? Slap, slap, slap. Trish couldn't stop her hands from slapping Lachlan's face. With a grunt, her final slap sent him flying, crashing into a small room in the courtyard. Trish, are you crazy? Her stepmother shouted hysterically. Trish turned to face her. She raised her hand, about to slap her stepmother. Her stepmother's eyes widened in fear and she immediately covered her face with her hands. She dared not say another word. At this moment, two figures emerged. Gingerly, they touched the enchanted barrier set up by the Zhao clan. Immediately, a ray of blood light shot at them. Crack, with a flick of his hand, a light flashed from one of the figures, slicing through the blood light. In doing so, the barrier broke apart. Who are you? How dare you break into our house without permission? Trish's stepmother said in a shaky voice, unable to contain her horror. Lachlan climbed out of the ruins and his face changed when he saw the two people in the air. Trish's face was full of joy and surprise as she walked up and bowed to Zen. Mr. Luo, I'm so sorry. I failed to return to the Su clan today, because... I know. Zen gently raised his hand to stop Trish from speaking any further. Turning to face her stepmother, Zen said coldly, Trish is my maid, and I am taking her away today. Do you dare to defy this? Trish's stepmother was aware that she served a disciple from the Flow Sword sect. Back when the Yan clan was still influential, the Flow Sword sect was unpopular and known to be weak. However, now, she trembled slightly at Zen's words. I don't dare, she replied hastily. It wasn't my idea to keep Trish here. It was the Zhao clan's idea. The woman immediately pointed a finger at Lachlan. Zen didn't want to argue further with her, so he turned to look at Lachlan. Lachlan was a mess. His face was red and swollen from the slaps, his clothes covered in rubble and dust. Yet, there was still a fierce look in his eyes. She's right, Trish is mine. What do you want? Lachlan had also gone to the Ripple Pavilion with his clan members earlier that day, but he had no interest in the competition. Instead, as the giant drums gathered to form the battle ring, he decided to spend the afternoon with a whore. He hadn't heard about what happened till the competition came to an abrupt end. What do I want? Zen blinked. I want Trish. She's coming with me. Do you really think you can leave this city? Lachlan said unflinchingly. Then, he pulled out a jade pendant that hung from his waist. Without any hesitation, he crushed it in his hand. Buzz! From the broken shards of the jade pendant, a green light flashed. Seeing this, Trish's eyes widened in fear. Mr. Luo, we'd better get going. If the people from Zhao clan come over, I'm afraid you'll be in trouble. Trish knew that Zen, an outstanding disciple of the Flow Sword sect, might not be afraid of the Zhao clan. But this wasn't the Oneness Sky Palace. There were some notably strong people in the Zhao clan. If Zen insisted on staying, she was afraid he'd get hurt, which was the last thing she wanted to see. It doesn't matter, Zen said indifferently. Lachlan sneered at Zen's calm face. The Zhao clan had been doing business by the Clear Lake for many years. Every year, they offered a lot of magic pills to the Oneness Sky Palace and had a very good relationship with the palace. Lachlan, in his haughtiness, thought he could punish any disciple of the palace without much consequence. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. In a matter of seconds, a dozen figures swept across the sky above the Yan clan's house. In the blink of an eye, they landed in the small courtyard, each figure equally menacing. One of the figures stood out among the rest. It was the leader of the Zhao clan. Father. Lachlan beamed at the sight of his father, and he confidently glared at Zen. This brat has made trouble here, he said arrogantly. He doesn't take our clan seriously. The master of the Zhao clan strode forward, surveying the damage, the fallen servants and the destroyed walls. But when his eyes landed on Zen, he gasped in shock. He immediately recognized that Zen was the one who ruined the competition at the Ripple Pavilion. Moreover, this was the guy who had killed a direct descendant of the Vastness Mountain effortlessly. With a shake of his head, he wondered inwardly, what did Lachlan do to piss this man off? Father, Lachlan echoed, what are you waiting for? Arrest this guy and punish him severely. Otherwise the other people may think we're weak and incompetent. Slap. The master of the Zhao clan slapped his son's face, much harder than Trish had. Lachlan rubbed his temples as his thoughts swirled dizzily. Once he came back to his senses, his mouth fell in shock. His father was bowing deeply to Zen in respect. That was the highest honor. Only grandsons would bow to their grandfathers in this way. But this was Lachlan's father, the lord of the Yan Zhao city and the master of the Zhao clan. How could he do this to a mere disciple of the Oneness Sky Palace? Lachlan was totally confused. I'm sorry that I didn't teach my son well, the master said cautiously. Mr. Luo, please forgive him. The master of the Zhao clan was well aware that Zen had just defeated notable warriors earlier that day. If he stirred conflict now, it might ruin the reputation of the Zhao clan. Moreover, he also knew his third son well. He knew that Lachlan was in the wrong without having to ask what happened. Zen cast a cold glance at the master of the Zhao clan. I don't want to get involved in the affairs between the Yan clan and the Zhao clan. This is your son's fault, he should never have offended Trish. Lachlan, the master cried angrily, come here, kneel down. Lachlan turned livid with rage. His father had never been so strict with him. He walked over reluctantly, but refused to kneel. Mumbling, he said, she's just a maid. A maid. I said kneel down. The master of the Zhao clan raised his voice. Lachlan finally flopped down on his knees in front of Zen. The master of the Zhao clan said, Mr. Luo, my good-for-nothing son is at your disposal. Zen waved his hand indifferently. Break his legs and arms. Don't treat him in a year. Without any hesitation, the master of the Zhao clan flicked his wrist violently. Instantly, invisible forces rushed at Lachlan. Crack, crack, crack. With a terrible shriek, Lachlan collapsed to the floor, his arms and legs horribly disfigured. Let's go, Zen said expressionlessly. Before he turned to leave with Trish and Gant, he suddenly said, Trish is my maid. Narrowing his eyes, he continued ominously, I don't want her family to decline. The master of the Zhao clan broke out in a cold sweat, a chill running down his spine. Chapter 2792, Invitation to the Mountain. The Yan clan's decline had something to do with the Zhao clan. The master of the Zhao clan knew full well. If Zen looked any further into it, it would probably only cause more trouble. Fortunately, Trish was just his maid, and he said he didn't want to get involved in this. When the master of the Zhao clan finally calmed himself down, he heard Lachlan scream, Father! Some pills for my wounds. It really hurts. Who is that guy? Is he the son of the head of the Oneness Sky Palace? Father, why were you so respectful towards him? Lachlan lay on the ground in pain. He knew he had offended someone he shouldn't have. His father was just putting on a show and trying to prove a point. His arms and legs being broken was no big deal. The pills of the Zhao clan would heal him up in an instant. But his father still refused him the pills, and only continued to drive his foot into him again and again. Bang, 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 the kicks almost killed him. His father yelled furiously, You mongrel. You almost got us all killed. You want the pills? Forget it, you will stay on the ground this year. If anyone dares to heal you, I'll break their arms and legs as well. The master of the Zhao clan left with his people in tow. Trish's stepmother was trembling in a corner. Until now, she still didn't understand what had happened, but she vaguely knew that Trish's master was a somebody, and that somebody had made a statement that the Zhao clan could no longer make life hard for the Yan clan. On the flying ship, Zen sat upright at the front end. Trish contemplated a while before finding the courage to walk up to Zen. She walked up silently and unassumingly, and bowed to him. There's no need to be so courteous, Zen said with a friendly smile. I'm just your maid, yet you care so much for me, Trish said meekly. The fate of the Yan clan had always been controlled by the Zhao clan. If things went on like this, Yan would be removed from the city name sooner or later, and the city would be renamed the Zhao City. But Zen's warning was surely enough to scare off the master of the Zhao clan. It's no big deal, don't think on it too much, Zen said, smiling tenderly. Trish smiled too. She paused a moment before she spoke again, there's one more thing. The master of the Zhao clan is a powerful and influential man. Why is he so afraid of you? Even if Zen was an outstanding disciple of the Flow Sword sect, he was still not strong enough to intimidate a clan living by the Clear Lake. It's because today, Flag Master killed Marco, as well as his strong followers, Gant explained with a wry smile. Trish's eyes widened. Are you afraid? If you are afraid, you're free to leave, Gant said, toying with her still. Offending the direct line of the Oneness Sky Palace would bring quite serious trouble to whoever dared do such a thing. Zen, however, didn't just offend them. He killed one of them. Noticing Trish's shock and stillness, Gant continued to threaten her playfully, there's probably going to be something disastrous waiting for us when we return to the Oneness Sky Palace. And I'm afraid those of us who work for Flag Master Zen are likely to be put under fire too. After a moment of panic, Trish managed to compose herself. She stood up straight, tightened her jaw and said, I'm not afraid of anything. At the worst, I will die with Mr. Luo. Seeing she was taking Gant's words seriously, Zen smiled and said, don't listen to Gant. I know what I'm doing. Truthfully, he wasn't too sure what he was doing. In his current position, he really couldn't afford to offend the Vastness Mountain. All depended on Marco's status in the Shu clan on the Vastness Mountain. If Marco really was very important, it was possible that even Athamar would not be able to simmer the anger of the Vastness Mountain. But Zen had an important bargaining chip, and that was the truth enlightenment of the truth of eternal sword intent. He firmly believed that the truth enlightenment could solve all problems. Half a day later, the three stepped into the transmission array. It was already early morning when they returned to Dragon City. The dark starry sky began to fade and brighten. Zen didn't go directly up the mountain but instead left the Dragon City with Gant and Trish. Monica had completely adapted to her role. Amongst the Alliance chiefs, she was the weakest, but none of them dared to disobey or ignore her. Zen gave her enough divine crystals to keep the operation of her alliance running. She had more and more flag masters join her and more than 10,000 people at her command, making her alliance the largest outside the Dragon City. When Zen arrived, Monica appeared pleasantly surprised and noticeably uneasy at the same time. The disciples from the Sword Light Palace, including Belden, Elgin and Kenelm, had also come when they heard the news. It had been a long time since they had seen Zen last time. Zen, Alliance Chief, Flag Master, Kenelm stammered as he ran over. He had called him all these things at one point or another. Now that Zen had gone up the mountain, he didn't know what to call him. Just call him Flag Master. Right, he will always be our Flag Master. Quote quote. Jago and the others giggled casually. Zen glanced around and asked curiously, why don't I see Nellie, Lavender and Laquisha? Monica appeared distressed by hearing their names. She spoke solemnly to Zen, I have something to tell you. A few days ago, I asked someone to go to the mountain to look for you, but you weren't there. What happened? Where are they? Zen asked, his concern growing with every word. Zen had won first place in the Seven Mountains meeting and offended many people. No one had come after him as blatantly as Marco. Perhaps they would use some dirty tricks to get back at him. If anyone hurt his family. At the thought of this, Zen's face darkened. They have gone up the mountain, Monica said. Elder Sellers from the Dragon City said the Oneness Sky Palace had sent out an invitation. They said that the three of them had outstanding talent and they wanted to meet them. I know them. They would not agree to something like that, Zen said affirmatively. Laquisha and Lavender would definitely ask for Zen's opinion if they wanted to join a sword sect on the mountain. They wouldn't go up the mountain without telling him. You're right, they didn't agree, but someone from the mountain took them away. Someone forced them. I'm sorry, Monica said full of remorse. Zen trusted Monica and felt safe leaving his three wives with her. Her heart was filled with great sorrow and guilt as she had failed him. The last few days had been hell for her trying to figure out how she would break it to him. Don't blame yourself. It's not your fault, Zen comforted Monica. No matter how strong Monica was, she was only an alliance chief of the Dragon City. The people on the mountain didn't even take the Oneness Guard seriously. It was simply impossible for Monica to have stopped them. After staying outside the Dragon City for a while, Zen ordered Trish to go up the mountain by herself. Then, he went into the Dragon City and headed straight to the Sword Tower. Now that Sellers was involved, he seemed to know exactly what was going on. Chapter 2793, The Phoenix Palace. In the Sword Tower, Sellers saw Zen rush in. The mask he had on was only barely concealing the helpless smile underneath. Master Sellers, I just came back to Dragon City. I heard that Nellie, Laquisha and Lavender had been taken away. Which sect did they join? Zen asked. Usually, the warriors in the Dragon City who had gone up the mountain would join the Flow Sword sect, the Killing Sword sect or the Unique Array Sword sect. But sometimes, the other 6 mountains would choose the disciples in the Dragon City too. They didn't join any, Sellers said with a light shake of his head. What do you mean? Zen frowned. He figured they must have been under house arrest instead. Was it the Vastness Mountain disciples who had taken them away? Zen's brows furrowed deeper. Suddenly, he felt the urge to kill flow through his veins. Someone from the Phoenix Palace took them away, Sellers said. Did you do anything to offend them? The Phoenix Palace was the core of the Oneness Mountain. The palace only trained and recruited disciples who were in the direct line of Eastern Emperor Tai. Lavender, Nellie, and Laquisha were talented, but none of them were qualified to enter the Phoenix Palace. Their sudden kidnapping to the Phoenix Palace was odd. Sellers figured that Zen must have had something to do with it. Me, offend the Phoenix Palace? Zen rubbed his chin as he tried to recall. Then, a trace of cold light flashed through his eyes. Elvinia, he exclaimed. Sellers gasped. What did you do to offend her? He asked. Not every descendant of Eastern Emperor Tai held a high status, but Elvinia was highly favored. Sellers tried to stop the Phoenix Palace from taking away Zen's women, but he was threatened by a powerful warrior from the palace. He wondered whom Zen had offended to lead to this. Finally, Sellers gained clarity. Humph, Zen snorted. It was nothing. We just had some conflict in the Seven Mountains meeting. Whatever happened between them, Zen found it unreasonable that Elvinia would involve the three women just to deal with him. It was a low blow in his standards. Where is the Phoenix Palace? Master Sellers, can you take me there? Zen asked. What are you planning to do? Sellers asked him. Take them back. Yes, exactly, Zen confirmed. He was afraid of what Elvinia would do to his women. He didn't want to waste any more time. The Phoenix Palace is located at the back of the Oneness Mountain. It's surrounded by the primitive illusion. It's not an easy place to go to. I've never been there, Sellers said. As if ignoring what he had said, Zen rushed out of the sword tower. Zen, it's not easy to penetrate the primitive illusion. Not even brute force would work. Please, think about what you're about to do. Sellers desperately wanted to stop Zen, but without success. Zen knew his way up the mountain. Halfway through the mountain, he decided to abandon his route. Instead, he flew towards the other side. The sword arrays on the Oneness Mountain were usually inactive, so it was not dangerous for Zen to fly along the mountain. The mountain was huge. Its three peaks were occupied by different sects, namely, Flow Sword Sect, Killing Sword Sect, and Unique Arrays Sword Sect. And the Phoenix Palace occupied the back of the mountain. But few disciples were able to see the palace. From above, that area was covered with white fog called the primitive illusion. It was a mirage that protected the Phoenix Palace. After flying for a while, Zen was finally seeing the fog below him. He smiled with satisfaction. Seeing the impenetrable fog, however, he almost retreated. But the mere memory of his women motivated him to land without hesitation. Swoosh! The thick fog hung in the air and blocked his line of sight. He could barely see the outlines of the trees that surrounded him. Spiritual sense. Zen blinked several times until a strand of his spiritual sense began to spread out. However, as soon as it was out of his system, it disappeared without a trace. Did the fog swallow my spiritual sense? Zen was slightly shocked. He was walking aimlessly without his spiritual sense and eyesight. He didn't even know where the Phoenix Palace was exactly located. Whoosh! His feet kicked the ground and his body jumped up. He rapidly shuttled through the fog. He flew fast, but this did not help him. The fog kept on drifting and covering everything in front of him. Zen halted and gave his next steps some thought. He opened his right eye and a flash of white light appeared. The authentic visual world. Suddenly, his surroundings became clearer. It was still covered with fog. Not even his demonic eye could see through it. But, through the fog, he was able to outline a long and thin black figure in the distance. He proceeded towards its direction. A few moments later, he was finally standing in front of it. It was a pillar similar to the ones in a royal palace. However, it looked tattered and disheveled, as if it had been there for a while. Zen stepped closer to approach the pillar when, suddenly, another thin black shadow caught his right eye. Are these pillars leading the way to the Phoenix Palace? Zen muttered to himself. Whoosh! Zen flashed swiftly toward the second pillar. As he neared it, a third one appeared not too far away. Zen's guess was correct. To protect the Phoenix Palace, Eastern Emperor Tai had arranged the primitive illusion. It was designed with the 18 pillars passed down from the primitive temple. The pillars were almost invincible. No normal method worked against them. Gratefully, they were free of wars and major conflicts now, and so the primitive illusion wasn't fully activated. Servants, maids and guards needed to go up and down the mountain. They carried with them a special token that allowed them to see the pillars and go as they pleased. Zen didn't need the special token to see the pillars. He was able to see them with his demonic eye. He continued to follow the pillars upwards. Finally, he saw a huge palace gate with a plaque that said, Phoenix Palace. Here it is. Without any hesitation, Zen went up and knocked on the palace gate. Bang, bang, bang. Obviously, the Phoenix Palace did not receive plenty of visitors. The few distinguished guests usually had their own ushers. No one in recent history had done what Zen did. No one just climbed up the mountain, navigated the fog, and knocked at the palace gate. So, when they heard the loud banging on the gate, the golden armored guards of the Phoenix Palace were taken aback. They looked among themselves, wondering who it could be. Chapter 2794, Lady Flamen. From atop the wall, the golden armored guards watched Zen knocking at the gate. Exchanging dubious glances, they started whispering amongst themselves in wonder. This man isn't a servant of the Phoenix Palace. How could he have walked out of the primitive illusion? Finally, the leading guard called Zen's attention. "Who are you?" he shouted with a frown. "Why do you knock on the gate?" Zen, looking up to face the guard, answered clearly, "I'm Zen Luo, a disciple of the Flow Sword sect. I'm looking for Elvinia." A disciples of the Flow Sword sect. The guards exchanged puzzled glances. Their leader continued to speak to Zen harshly. "I don't care which sect you are from. You are not welcome here. Get out." The Phoenix Palace was where the direct descendants of East Emperor Tai lived. Additionally, it was the core area of the Oneness Mountain. It was impossible for ordinary people to enter. Zen's expression darkened as his patience ran thin. He leapt forward, and ricocheted off the wall, launching himself into the air. With a determined look on his face, he decided right then and there that he was going to break through the gate. Once the leading guard realized what he was up to, he sneered haughtily, "Never in my years here have I witnessed anyone attempt to break into the Phoenix Palace. Sir, you are courting death. Don't blame me for killing you." Bang! Eyes flashing menacingly, he then channeled his aura to summon a large golden shield, which smashed towards Zen. The leader had been a 5-star Oneness guard. Due to his excellence, he was transferred to guard the Phoenix Palace. While the technique he used was relatively simple, the sheer force of the shield attack reached 800 divine megatons. Zen's eyes narrowed as he observed the approaching shield. With gritted teeth, he summoned the strength from the Strength God Totem, while simultaneously gathering the Shade Stone's liquid into his right hand. Bang! The other guards covered their ears in anguish at the deafening sound, lights flashing everywhere, which blinded them. When they finally regained their senses, they were stunned. Their leader had been flung off the wall, and had fallen into the square of the Phoenix Palace. The impact was so great that a crater was formed where he landed. Zen, on the other hand, stood firmly on the wall, unscathed. The guards shuffled backwards uneasily, maintaining a distance from Zen. "Where is Elvinia?" Zen demanded once more, staring at the guards coldly. Although they trembled underneath their golden-plated armor, all the guards shook their heads in defiance. They knew their responsibility was to protect the Phoenix Palace. Even if Zen terrified them, they stood their ground. Crack! Zen moved forward in a flash. In the blink of an eye, his hand was on the neck of one of the guards. With a restrained squeeze, he shouted, "Tell me. Now." I. The guard was frozen in fear. At this moment, a clear voice came from inside the palace. "A mere disciple of the Flow Sword sect dares to act wildly in the Phoenix Palace. Why do you think of us so lowly?" As the cool voice floated over, a purple ribbon snaked its way across the palace square, heading straight for Zen. The purple ribbon, like a nimble dragon, shot towards Zen in a zigzag motion. Zen threw the guard aside to reach out and grab the ribbon. However, as soon as his fingers grazed the silken ribbon, it split into 2, then 4, until they coiled around his body. As the ribbons intertwined around Zen, he felt a terrifying power. The ribbons tightened their grip on him. The pressure was not something that Zen could withstand. Not long after, he found it difficult to breathe. Whoosh! Zen was yanked forward by the ribbons, as though he was a mere puppet. It all happened so fast, his surroundings seemed to whip past him. He could barely make out being dragged through several palace gates, over gardens and courtyards. Bang! Finally, Zen smashed into the front door of one of the palaces. A woman garbed in purple stood not far away with crossed arms. Her fierce eyes studied the helpless figure before her, wrapped in purple ribbons. The woman stepped forward gracefully. Zen noticed she had a pretty face. She was captivating at first glance. However, that didn't stop him from trying to wriggle his way out of the ribbons. No matter how much he twisted and struggled, he was unable to get rid of the seemingly ordinary ribbons. The woman was a little surprised. "You haven't gone through the chaotic source reinforcement, and yet your power is so extraordinary. Normal human bodies could withstand 300 divine megatons of other shore power. Some strong-built humans could withstand 600 divine megatons of other shore power. For example, Marco's other shore token, which could absorb his opponent's other shore power, had the potential to unleash the force of 500 divine megatons. Although he could only bear the force of 300 divine megatons, the other 200 divine megatons of force would be borne by his sword. As Zen struggled, he also released a force of more than 1,000 divine megatons. This would have been impressive for non-human creatures, all the more for humans. After struggling for a while, Zen finally stopped. He twisted his body one more time, to face the beautiful woman wordlessly. By this time, the guards had rushed over, kneeling before the lady. Even the leader knelt humbly. This person trespassed into the Phoenix Palace under my watch. We failed to stop him. Please, Lady Flamen, punish me. Flamen gave them an amused smile. She showed no traces of anger whatsoever. With an elegant wave of her hand, she said, "It's no big deal. You can leave now." "Yes, Lady Flamen." The leader stood up with a salute. Turning to the other guards, he gestured for them to take the subdued Zen with them. Flamen, however, stopped him. "Let him stay. But this person trespassed into the Phoenix Palace. He needs to be punished severely." The leader cried indignantly. As a 5-star oneness guard, it was humiliating for him to have been sent flying by a flow sword sect disciple's punch. "Let him stay. I need to talk to him," said Flamen firmly. "Yes, Lady Flamen." The guards could do nothing but bow humbly to the woman and take their leave. If Zen was just an ordinary disciple of the Oneness Sky Palace, Flamen would have let the guards take him away. However, she could sense Zen's extraordinary power. This definitely piqued her interest. Swoosh! Flamen withdrew her ribbons, freeing Zen from his shackles. "Why did you break into the Phoenix Palace, young man?" Flamen asked, eyes sparkling with curiosity. Rubbing his hands and neck, he answered calmly, "I'm looking for Elvinia." "Elvinia?" Flamen raised an eyebrow in surprise. "Why are you looking for her?" "She took my people away," Zen answered bluntly. Scratching her chin delicately, she asked, "Why did she take your people away?" Heaven knows what that stupid woman was thinking. He cried exasperatedly. "Maybe since she lost to me in the Seven Mountains meeting, she has been holding a grudge towards me." Zen shook his head in frustration. When Flamen heard Zen cursing Elvinia, her cheeks flushed red with embarrassment. "I can take you to see her. You can help me find her." Zen's eyes lit up at her offer. "Of course, if what you say is true, I must make her apologize. After all, I'm her mother." She smiled cunningly. Zen was stunned. He recalled how Connor told him that Elvinia had been brought back from the divine lair. Did this mean Flamen was also a non-human creature from the divine lair? Chapter 2795, The Stone Statue. The demon women from the divine lair of the Sun Crow race all had a pair of huge sprawling wings. Flamen and Elvinia were as beautiful as those demon women, but they didn't have wings. This sudden encounter with Elvinia's mother had made Zen uncomfortable and was creating a little trouble for him. Looking at a stunned Zen, Flamen calmly instructed, "Follow me. I'll take you there." She entered through the palace gate as she spoke, gliding with graceful steps and dragging purple ribbons behind her. Zen hesitated a moment before deciding to follow her in. Eastern Emperor Tai had many children, and the Phoenix Palace was quite large and magnificent. They came across very few people as they walked. Any guards and maids they saw knelt and saluted Flamen respectfully. They walked along a tall red wall for some minutes when Zen turned and was faced with a gigantic palace gate. Just before it stood a triangular bronze furnace. In it, flames flickered and jet out in spurts and a faint golden light glowed from within. "This is the divine flame of the Sun Crow race," Zen pointed out in surprise, raising his eyebrows slightly. Flamen walked just ahead of Zen, but she was stunned when she heard him and turned back to look at him. "You know the flame?" "I have been to the mountain viewing province. There I saw the demon women and such flames," Zen said. He had intended to tell her he had seen Elizabeth then. But after considering the link between Flamen and Elvinia and the divine lair, he changed his mind, afraid that Flamen would ask many questions. Flamen pointed lightly at the bronze furnace. A divine flame flew from the furnace, turning into a small fire bird and rushing to Flamen. It then stopped when it reached her and settled itself on her sleeve. Zen didn't know what material her beautiful purple dress was made of, but she clearly was not afraid of the burning of the divine flame. The fire bird stayed in her hand for a short while and then snapped into a wisp of flame. It hissed and entered her mouth horrifyingly. Flamen had swallowed the divine flame. She spoke as she swallowed. "The Sun Crow race was born in the divine flames, and their blood power is hidden in them. Even the demon women born in the divine lair can't live without the divine flames." She had just admitted she was a non-human creature from the divine lair. It seemed that the bronze furnace was there to produce endless divine flames for her and Elvinia to devour as they required. After absorbing the divine flame, she stepped through the huge palace gate, followed by Zen. As soon as they entered the palace gate, two maids dressed in blue hurriedly came to them. "Lady Flamen," the maids in blue greeted, kowtowing to Flamen. "Is Elvinia in the heavenly cultivation palace?" asked Flamen. "Yes, she is," one of the maids in blue answered respectfully. "Take me to her," commanded Flamen. "Yes, Lady Flamen." The two maids in blue led the way dutifully. The heavenly cultivation palace was a place for cultivation in the Phoenix Palace. Along the way, there were 4 tall towers and some other large buildings, from which a strong energy could be felt emitting. A short while later, the maids had brought them to the fire-bearing hall in the innermost circle of the palace. "Lady Flamen, please wait here. I'll let Princess Elvenia know you are here." The maid in blue kowtowed to Flamen once more before scurrying into the fire-bearing hall. Zen was growing impatient. The Phoenix Palace was like the royal palace of the Divine Kingdom. There were too many formalities. Luckily, Zen didn't have to wait much more. Before long, Elvenia appeared at the gate of the fire-bearing hall. "Mother, what can I do for you?" she asked, exacerbating and impatient. Flamen smiled and said, "Nothing for me, but Mr. Luo wants to see you." "Who is Mr. Luo?" Elvenia raised her head and saw Zen standing close by. A fierce look flashed in her eyes. As the direct descendant of the Oneness Mountain, she was fate's favored one. Her parents spoiled her very much, and she was regarded quite highly among her peers. Even her brothers and sisters didn't dare to cross her. She lost to Zen at the 7 Mountains meeting, and even worse, he humiliated her to her face. This enraged her massively and she could not let it go. "Look at you," she said with condescending surprise. "You actually came right to the Phoenix Palace. Who brought you here, Athamar or Goran?" Elvenia sneered, one eyebrow raised. Zen's face darkened with anger as he barked, "It doesn't matter how I got in. Where are Nellie, Laquisha and Lavender? I will get them back." He had no idea as to where they were or whether they were safe or not. He'd been worrying about them all this time and all the way here. A triumphant smile graced Elvenia's frigid face as she saw the concern drawn across Zen's face. "They are enduring the soul fire swirl, so I will not give them to you. If you want them back, you have to go through me first." Zen had no idea what the soul fire swirl was. But it sounded to him like a cruel punishment. Rage burned from his heart throughout his entire being. Bang! He kicked off the ground and was gone in a flash, rushing at Elvenia in complete disregard of Flamen. Flamen was close enough to have stopped Zen if she wanted. But she saw the expressions on her daughter's face before she moved and decided to just stand aside and let this be. Elvenia laughed scornfully at Zen charging at her. "I may have lost to you at the 7 Mountains meeting, but that was not a competition of real strength. You just took advantage of the truth enlightenment. Do you really think you're powerful enough for this?" Zen's hand was already moving at breakneck speed to grab her when she was done speaking. Elvenia's eyes overflowed with hatred in the face of Zen's grab. She stretched out her hand and gave it a gentle wave. Thanks to her unique body, her slender hand was able to unleash 300 to 400 divine megatons of force. Even Marco and Connor couldn't withstand this gentle wave. But when she touched Zen's arm, the color disappeared from her face. She realized immediately that she had got it all wrong. It seemed as if Zen's right hand was made of fine steel, and the power that he unleashed was beyond her imagination. He grabbed her, swung his arm over his head, and slammed her into the ground behind him. Bang! The floor was cracked and near destroyed from the impact. Elvenia appeared almost buried. If it were Marco who had been thrown, he would have been seriously hurt if not dead. However, there were indistinct fire textures on the surface of Elvenia's body, and she appeared unharmed. "Tell me, where are they?" Zen snarled mercilessly. If Elvenia didn't tell him the whereabouts of his wives, he would kill her right in front of her mother. Lying on the ground, Elvenia opened her eyes wide as she looked at Zen. She could not believe how Zen treated her. She had never been treated this way in her life. She snapped back to reality and her irritation returned with her. She raised her head and sniggered, "As I said, if you want to know their whereabouts, defeat me first." As she finished speaking, 2 golden lights suddenly materialized in her hands. A golden sun appeared in her right hand, and a golden moon appeared in her left. She closed her eyes and slapped both hands into the ground firmly. Buzz! A huge stone statue had appeared before Zen. The stone statue had a strange shape. It had 16 arms in total, and 15 of them were on its left side. There was only one on the right. The moment it appeared, it thrust its only right arm at Zen. Chapter 2796, Warrior of the Stone Hill. The stone statue's right hand was so frighteningly powerful that the space in front of Zen bent out of shape. Bang! Zen was knocked back for dozens of feet from the massive force. Splash! It looked as though he was wiping the ground with his entire body as he continued to be swept away from the impact, leaving a ditch in front of him before he finally crashed into a huge building. The building was called the Sword-Bearing Hall. It was a dwelling built explicitly for the direct descendants of the Phoenix Palace to cultivate sword skills. The unfortunate events caused an imperfection in the form of a large hole on the wall of the Sword-Bearing Hall. What just happened? Who dares to fight in the Heavenly Cultivation Palace? I think it's Elvenia. Apparently, the commotion happening outside had distracted the direct descendants from practicing in the heavenly cultivation palace. Most of them paused their practice to come out and make sense of what they just heard. As a result, their jaws dropped to the floor when their eyes fell on the broken wall, and the tiles piled up on the ground. Elvenia scoffed at the ruins and rolled her eyes indifferently. She had full faith Zen wouldn't get back up from that attack. If anything, she thought he was dead. Not wanting to say a word till she saw it for herself, Lady Flamen remained quiet and kept her gaze fixed at the ruins. A few seconds after, she noticed something that made her gasp. Boom! Minor turbulence could be seen coming from the pile of tiles as they shook noticeably. A huge boulder about 10 feet wide was flipped over by a black hand as a black figure emerged from the ruins. Curious at the sudden appearance of a man cloaked with black substance around his body, Elvenia squinted her eyes to focus on his direction. She was shocked to see it was Zen, who now wiped the debris off his shoulders and cracked his knuckles as if unfazed by her move. The other shore token she possessed was called the Warrior of the Stone Hill. The Stone Hill race had deep ancient roots. Similar to the legendary Stone God, they would grow in the form of rocks. When they'd reach the age they matured in, they would emerge from the rocks. The strong warriors from that race were called the Warriors of the Stone Hill. In search of this other shore token, the Oneness Sky Palace had dug out an entire mountain in Stage 13. It took them several decades to do so. It was a descending type of other shore token, which was extremely powerful because it had the potential to evolve further. The Warrior of the Stone Hill could further upgrade itself to the Saint of the Stone Hill. The day it happened, the power of it would multiply by dozens. To attain that ascension in power, Elvenia had to get to the Stone Hill Temple on Stage 22. However, she had a ways to go yet. Even with the current level of her other shore token, Elvenia's single attack had exceeded 600 divine megatons of force. That kind of power was way beyond her physical strength, so it was borne by the other shore token itself. How come Zen resisted an attack of that intensity and took no damage? The black layer of shade stone cloaking Zen's body began to dissipate from his skin, and permeated into his bones from his pores. Once it disappeared completely, Zen regained his usual appearance. He never imagined Elvenia would play so rough and prove to be a nuisance. What more could he expect from a direct descendant like her? Even so, Zen did not intend to stand down from this fight. He could compromise on many things without caring about them, but letting his women bear the pain for him wasn't one of them. Buzz. Securely gripping the snow sword in his hands, he pointed the end in her direction as if to challenge her. Swiftly, he took one step back to gain momentum and pushed himself forward. He dashed towards Elvenia once more. The mysterious movements of the snow sword made it tough to foretell the direction of the attack. When Zen got halfway through to her, the sword's actions became as fast as lightning. They were hard to be seen through the naked eye. 9 flashlights splitting, swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The sword morphed itself into dazzling flashes of light that all shot towards Elvenia vengefully from all directions. Pathetic. Elvenia spited at him as she raised her hand and shook it slightly. She opened up a space ring, from which long swords shot out one after the other. Crack, crack, crack. With its 15 left hands outstretched, the Warrior of the Stone Hill reached out and grabbed those long swords coming from the space ring. Now armed with 15 long swords in its 15 hands, Elvenia's other short token looked more frightening than ever. Slash at him now. Elvenia pointed towards the light shooting through Zen's sword and commanded her other short token dominantly. At her wish, the 15 armed hands slashed vigorously at Zen in frantic movements. They moved swiftly and even overlapped with each other, but there was not a single collision between them. Each attack had precision and accuracy. From their rapid continuous movements, the swords formed a silver shield to deflect any attack and keep Elvenia out of harm's way. Cling, cling, cling. Even though Zen's 9 flashlight splitting swordsmanship was formidable, it still failed to break through the silver curtain that protected her. Even so, he had no plans on backing down, as the speed of the sword in his hands grew gradually. It became faster and faster. Oh my goodness, the swords are moving too fast. I can't believe Elvenia has progressed again. Who is this guy, and why is he challenging someone like Elvenia? He doesn't seem to be like one of us. The direct descendants of the Phoenix Palace discussed among themselves without keeping their eyes off of the intense scene. Elvenia was the youngest of the direct descendants, despite that she had the most potential. After all, Eastern Emperor Tai was quite fond of her. Due to that, they never dared underestimate her skills. On many occasions, she had proven herself to have talents beyond the reach of her peers. She was always ahead of them. Even without the aid of her other shore token, she could easily beat any of them in battle. Nice sword shield, but I wouldn't count on it to protect me if I were you. A confident smirk appeared on Zen's face as one corner of his mouth tilted upwards. He continued his relentless attacks to break his way through. Not holding back, he charged fearlessly into the sword curtain guarding her. Before he made his way through it, the black layer on his skin appeared once more and covered his entire body up like armor. Cling, 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 one after another, the long swords rained down on Zen, but failed to pierce through his body. It was like he was made up of pure iron. Watching Zen draw closer with every passing second, Elvinia felt slightly panicked. Taking caution to the situation, she began to move backward gracefully as if gliding on the surface of the water. Stalling for time before she could make her move, she kept retreating to keep Zen in the sword curtain. Cling, 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 within just 10 seconds, the swords had hit Zen tens of thousands of times. However, his movements remained quick. There was no hint of staggering or injury on his body. Having witnessed this incredible spectacle, the spectators were rendered speechless. Each of their jaws had made their home on the floor as they stood there rooted to the ground. These direct descendants from the Oneness Mountain received a better education than the ordinary people, and they had had their fair share of experiences. However, nothing compared to what they were observing just now. Was that body covered in black substance still human? Elvinia kept at her attempts on retreating, but Zen was faster. He finally caught up to her and managed to pass through the sword curtain. With a determined look on her face, she raised her right hand. As if to mimic her gestures, the warrior of the stone hill raised its right hand as well and aimed for Zen. Even if Zen was resilient enough to withstand the sword curtain, Elvinia was sure he couldn't survive the warrior of the stone hill. Phew! With quick action, the warrior of the stone hill launched its attack on Zen with its right hand. It wanted to smash Zen like a bothersome insect. The strength held by the enormous palm apparently reached a specific limit. Anything that came under it would be reduced to little silver dust. Look at that, it's unbelievable. At the sight of the large palm, Zen prepared himself. He tightened his jaw and twisted his face while he drew massive power from his strength god totem. What is he doing? The power of the warrior of the stone hill reaches the limit of the lust world. He doesn't stand a chance. The ultimate force should exceed 1,000 divine megatons. This is suicide. Is he going to get smashed under it? The direct descendants of the Phoenix Palace shared pitiful looks as they found out that Zen refused to move from his spot and wanted to take the warrior of the stone hill head on. To them, he was already a dead man. Zen stood straight as he composed himself. The other shore power he had gathered from the strength god totem was ready. With a determined look on his face, he dashed to hit the gigantic palm falling down on him. Chapter 2797, Unexpected Fear. The warrior of the stone hill was 10 times bigger than an ordinary person, which was why it had such a large palm. The huge palm pressed down, distinctly contrasting with Zen's black fist. Zen gave his all to extract his strength to the fullest. He channeled most of the shade stone liquid into his right arm, leaving only a small part to converge in his spine. He was afraid that his spine wouldn't be able to bear such a strong impact and crash. Flamin's eyes were sparkling with a golden brilliance, the radiance of the divine flames of the Sun Crow race. Logic dictated that she should stop the fight right this moment. She rarely left the Phoenix Palace and she didn't know Zen, but her keen eyes allowed her to minutely observe Zen's potential. She assumed that such talent might be greatly valued in the Flow Sword sect. If he died in the Phoenix Palace could never explain themselves to the Flow Sword sect. But as she looked at Zen's powerful momentum, Flamin had a premonition that Zen would probably not be defeated by this blow. The premonition got the better of her and as a result, she did nothing to stop the fight. Bam! The entirety of the Heavenly Cultivation Palace shook violently as the palm met Zen's fist. Even the concubines, who were always in the depths of the Phoenix Palace, felt the tremor. A crackling sound ripped through the air. The warrior of the stone hill retracted its right hand, a crack spreading along it all the way to its shoulder. Ah! Elvinia looked at her other shore token in disbelief. It was unbelievable that the right hand of the warrior of the stone hill had cracked. There were many kinds of other shore tokens with different abilities on the other shore. The warrior of the stone hill was ranked among the top 5 other shore tokens of the descending type in the Lust world. Its strength and defensive power were considered the best in the Lust world. Elvinia had the ability to fight against the masters at the chaotic source realm with the help of this other shore token. And now, Zen had broken its arm with just one punch. The direct descendants of the Phoenix Palace looked on in shock at the powerful punch that had shaken the earth. He is outrageous. I've never heard of a person like him in the Oneness Sky Palace. But where is he? Why can't I see him? It looks like Elvinia's other short token sent him underground. He might have broken the warrior of the Stonehill with his punch, but I think he's badly injured as well. As they speculated, the ground behind Elvinia began to bulge. Before anyone could react, Zen emerged from it and made his way towards Elvinia. Elvinia was surprised to see Zen alive. He had taken the most powerful palm strike from the warrior of the Stonehill and turned it on the warrior such that it hadn't been able to bear the impact. How had this guy remained unharmed? When Elvinia saw that Zen was coming straight at her, her eyes began to flash with a golden light, like two suns shining in her eyes. No, Elvinia, you can't. Flamen was horrified at what was about to transpire before her eyes. Elvinia was going to release the divine flames of the Sun Crow race. Zen was now too close to Elvinia. It was too late for Flamen to stop him. With a crisp sizzling noise, gold flames poured out of Elvinia's body in all directions. At the rate they were going, they might burn everything they touched. The people of the Phoenix Palace watched the golden flames, paling in horror. The divine flames of the Sun Crow race also existed in the furnace at the gates of the Heavenly Cultivation Palace. Everyone knew of the power of the flames. Anyone who touched them was sure to die. The whole Heavenly Cultivation Palace would catch fire if Flamen didn't stop the flames soon. Once the people of the Phoenix Palace moved to a safe location, the ribbon that was on Flamen flew into the air and twisted into an enormous circle, a bright golden light radiating off of it. The divine flames of the Sun Crow race had been contained, but Zen was in trouble. Flamen was regretting not taking any early action. If she had known this would happen, she would have stopped it at the very beginning. She shouldn't have let the two kids fight each other. She turned to look at Zen but was surprised at what she saw. Zen glowed within the golden flames, unafraid of being burnt by the divine flames of the Sun Crow race. He grabbed Elvinia's snow-white neck with one hand and pushed her down, sneering as he said, "Your flames are stronger than those of the demon women of the divine lair, but if you think you can burn me to death, you're dreaming. Release them, or I will kill you." But Elvinia was incredibly tough. She hadn't the slightest intention of giving in. Flames lit up on her body, completely wrapping her within them. She grinned and said sarcastically, "Your strength is indeed beyond my expectation. But can you really kill me? Keep talking and you will see soon enough," Zen said, laughing. The pupil of his right eye suddenly began to glow. As the white light flashed, the snow sword came to his hand with a sudden whooshing sound. It was difficult for Zen's demonic eye to see through powerful warriors who had gone through the chaotic source reinforcement. Elvinia was powerful, but she was still in the lust world with Zen and hadn't gone through the chaotic source reinforcement yet. As he activated his demonic eye, he found many flaws in her body. The only thing that could protect her was the flame textures that wrapped her tightly within them, protecting her from getting injured. But with the help of the authentic visual world, Zen saw that these flame textures were not perfect. There were still minor flaws in the gaps between the textures. Under the neck, that was where the flaw of the flame textures and Elvinia's flaw overlapped. Elvinia was sure to die if he were to attack that spot. Go to perdition. As Zen brought his sword down, a flash of fear entered Elvinia's heart. She had assumed that under the protection of the flame textures, Zen would not be able to kill her. But she now had a premonition that this sword strike was going to shatter her into pieces. Red light flashed in Zen's eyes, magnifying the fear within her. She saw a faint illusion in which her body shattered to the ground like porcelain. Now that her emotions were all over the face, the apathetic defense that she had put up collapsed. "Ah, please don't kill me," Elvinia cried, her body straightening up and her hands curling reflexively. Her tears evaporated into steam the moment they formed, thanks to the golden flames. She had never been so afraid of death in her life. "No, please." Flamen was horrified at what was transpiring before her. The snow sword stopped abruptly, humming in midair, the tip pointing at Elvinia's chest. "Release them, and I will not kill you," Zen said. Killing Elvinia would be his last resort now. But this evil woman was stubborn. She'd never make a concession unless her life was threatened. "Please don't kill me, please." Elvinia seemed not to hear Zen as she continued to beg. Zen had already withdrawn the demonic eye but she was still seized with fear, unable to emerge from the panic it caused. Chapter 2798, An Outsider. A sharp, snapping sound cracked through the air. A purple ribbon lashed out at Zen, sending him flying with the force of the blow. Flamen rushed up to Elvinia and held her in her arms, looking worried. Zen steadied himself midair and landed cleanly on the ground. He stood up unharmed, giving Elvinia a strange look. In theory, as soon as the demonic eye stopped releasing the power of fear, then the imposed fears of the opponent would vanish. Zen had released the power of his demonic eye to frighten her, but even now that he had stopped, Elvinia remained in a state of deep fear. She seemed unable to shake off her terror. The divine flames of the Sun Crow race were gradually burning themselves out. Soon they extinguished, surrounded by the black, charred remnants of everything burned by the flames. In the arms of Flamen, Elvinia still trembled and shuddered with fear. Flamen raised her hand and gently touched the spot between Elvinia's brows. A soothing aura passed through her fingers and flowed into Elvinia's body, until she began to calm down. Flamen turned to Zen. "Did you use some trick to cause her such fear?" she demanded. The truth of goodwill and malice was a rather unpopular truth of godly way in the Oneness Sky Palace, but Flamen still recognized it immediately. What she didn't know was that Zen had used the power of the demonic eye. "Yes," said Zen. Flamen sighed. Instead of blaming Zen, she said guiltily, "It's my fault. After she was born, she was put through a series of very cruel tests in the divine lair. Your trick has brought back those terrible experiences to her." Many people imagined that a demon woman of the divine lair would grow up in an environment of love and care just like humans. In truth, it was nothing like that. Elvinia, for instance, had been considered a front-runner in the quest for the divine lair's next leader from the moment she was born. To establish her right to become the leader, she had been forced to compete from a very early age with other demon women of the divine lair in fights to the death. Countless young girls like her died at her hands, while she herself sustained various injuries and traumas. She grew up exposed to cruelty, death, and suffering. When Elvinia was 6 years old, Eastern Emperor Tai fought his way into the divine lair and took her under his care. If not for his intervention, Elvinia would have become the leader already. Although Elvinia spent the next several years in the relative safety of the Phoenix Palace, the memory of her childhood was indelible. Flamen had needed to use a special method to seal Elvinia's traumatic memories in the depths of her soul. However, there were some thirties of the truth of goodwill and malice that could still trigger her and stir up her childhood memories. Elvinia's bouts with panic and fear were particularly unsettling because she had otherwise developed a facade of indifference and detachment. It was the only way she could survive the brutal experiences of her childhood. "Then why didn't you stop us just now?" Zen admonished, frowning. Zen hadn't expected that he would have to fight Elvinia with Flamen on the sidelines, watching the battle the entire time. He felt anger rising in him. He had needed to force Elvinia to release Laquisha, Nellie and Lavender. Flamen continued to rub the spot between Elvinia's eyebrows, sadness appearing in her face. "I made a mistake. I wanted to see how far she had come, by seeing how far you could push her." Upon her return to the Phoenix Palace, Elvinia had been mostly laconic and indifferent to everything going on around her. Flamen spent as much time with her as she could, often staying by her side throughout the day, but there seemed to be little to no improvement in Elvinia's disposition. As a mother, she couldn't help but feel desperate for anything that could shake her daughter out of her apathy. But Flamen's efforts were in vain. Nothing she did succeeded in changing her daughter's attitude. Elvinia's heart had been shaped by fear and cruelty, and she now used indifference as a wall to guard against everything and anything that could do further damage to her psyche. "Wouldn't it be more painful for both of you if I kept pushing her?" Zen asked with a sigh. Flamen gave him a small smile. "No, when she is with you, she seems to be feeling things more deeply. Her emotions are richer. I am her mother and I never saw her that angry, but today I even saw her cry." When Flamen first brought Zen to her, Elvinia was indeed indifferent to her mother. She was apathetic towards everyone, really. Zen wanted to roll his eyes, although he resisted the urge. This was too strange for him. He couldn't help feeling like this Flamen and Elvinia were a matched pair of lunatics. Should he scare Elvinia occasionally to satisfy Flamen? The soul fire swirl is not a punishment. It's actually a cultivation method. Even the direct line of the Phoenix Palace would cherish this kind of cultivation method. "The people you want to find should not be in danger," Flamen said. Zen was stunned for a moment. To himself he thought, with a trace of exasperation, "If you two had made that clear earlier, we could have avoided the fight entirely." After a while, Elvinia finally awoke, and she found herself lying in her mother's arms. She saw Zen nearby and glared at him. Breaking free from Flamen's arms, she hurriedly got up and started to leave the place. "You lost to me," Zen said behind her. Elvinia stopped in her track and asked coldly, "So what do you want?" "Take me to find them," Zen said calmly. Flamen watched their exchange without comment. Elvinia hesitated, looking torn, then she seemed to make up her mind. "Follow me," she told Zen. Zen glanced at Flamen, who nodded her assent. Elvinia marched out and Zen followed her as she made her way to the fire-bearing hall. Flamen watched them leave, gazing at Zen's tall figure from behind. She smiled to herself, and murmured, "He's not afraid of the divine flames of the Sun Crow race, and his strength is greater than Elvinia's. I think they could be a good match." Streams of hot, intense auras reached Elvinia and Zen as they drew closer to the fire-bearing hall. The walls of the hall were strung with glowing, red-hot chains, which drooped down like noodles as the metal of the chains softened in the burning heat. When Elvinia and Zen glanced up at the beams supporting the chains, they could see the tongues of flame licking at the pillars and eaves. When they looked down at the floor, which was also emanating heat, they could see the same burning flames in the cracks. Zen was curious and would have liked to hear what people were cultivating in the fire-bearing hall. But, catching sight of Elvinia's stony, sullen face, he decided it would be best to stay quiet for now. The two of them walked silently down a long, narrow corridor, then Elvinia abruptly turned and entered a side hall. Zen followed. Zen instantly sensed a soul aura within the scorching, intense heat of the side hall. His eyes lit up with excitement. This aura was quite similar to the aura of the soul pills. It was similar to that of the starlight that had landed outside Dragon City. And yet, the aura here was far stronger than either of those. Indeed, the aura here was at least 10 times stronger than that of the soul pills or the starlight. There were 3 people seated cross-legged in the center of the hall. Lavender, Nellie, and Laquisha sat beneath several red-hot chains. There were small swirls of flame burning under each chain, and these seemed to be the source of the powerful soul aura. It was the first time Zen had seen a soul cultivated in such a manner. He was surprised and interested. "Is this the soul fire swirl?" he asked. "Well, what else would it be?" Elvinia snapped, still angry with Zen. Zen looked mildly embarrassed. "Ah, I thought it was a kind of torture for a moment." Elvinia's indifference was giving way to anger as she stared fiercely at Zen. At that moment, Nellie opened her eyes, and the flames swirling over her head immediately dissipated along the chain above her. Nellie saw Elvinia and grinned. "Little master, I feel my aura has improved again." Zen. Zen, watching Nellie, was puzzled by her reaction. He had not expected her to treat Elvinia as though she was an intimate, and he was surprised to feel like somewhat of an outsider. Laquisha and Lavender also opened their eyes. When Laquisha saw Zen, she showed no sign of distress or worry. She only smiled sweetly and said, "You finally found us here." "Little master said that you probably wouldn't be able to enter the Phoenix Palace," Lavender said, also favoring Zen with a smile. Zen was nonplussed. He had fought so hard to find these 3, but now they were acting as though they hadn't been in danger at all. He realized that they had not been imprisoned. They were never in any kind of peril, and they had not been worried about anything. Chapter 2799, Strangers. Zen stood there uncertainly and frowned. "You called her little master?" Lavender, Nellie and Laquisha exchanged knowing glances, then they all turned to face Zen. "We have all become Elvinia's disciples." Nellie beamed. "Since Elvinia is still quite young, we address her as Little Master." Zen shot a glance at Elvinia, who stared back at him unflinchingly. "But since you are fine, let's go back already," Zen said. He figured it wasn't appropriate for his wives to stay in the Phoenix Palace. He couldn't fathom why they needed to become disciples of Elvinia. However, to his surprise, both Nellie and Laquisha shook their heads. Even Lavender smiled wistfully without saying a word. Zen knew Lavender wouldn't ever go against his wishes, but he could tell from her reaction that she also thought the Phoenix Palace would be an excellent place to cultivate. He scratched his head, trying to figure out what to do. Initially, the girls had been against the idea. However, since Elvinia didn't cause them trouble and instead treated them as those direct descendants sincerely, they warmed up to the idea of training under her. They considered their options. The Phoenix Palace was definitely superior compared to the environment outside the Dragon City. Even the Flow Sword sect couldn't come close to it. After all, it was built by Eastern Emperor Tai, of course its resources were of the best quality. Besides, Elvinia did give them advice from time to time. No one could deny her talent. With her input and their good understandings, they made notable progress more rapidly than before. As a result, the 3 girls started calling her Little Master. Seeing Zen's upset expression, Laquisha came forward and held his hand in hers. "It's safe here," she batted her eyelashes at him. "If we were in the Dragon City, we might not be able to reach the other shore in decades. We can save a lot of time here." There were many challenges on the way to the other shore, such as the 9 lines and the huge whirlpools on the Sea of Truth, which posed a great risk. No one knew how many people were lost to the whirlpools or died on the 9 lines. However, this risk could be greatly reduced if they could train in the Phoenix Palace. Zen sighed. He knew this was true. Even if he had earned a lot of divine crystals by virtue of his instant enlightenment, he would not be able to provide such a good environment for the girls. But seeing Elvinia gloating over him, he couldn't help but feel exasperated. "Why did you bring them here?" Zen suddenly asked her. Elvinia hesitated for a while. "I want to get the truth enlightenment." On the day of the 7 Mountains meeting, Elvinia had been severely humiliated by Zen since he had more words of the truth enlightenment than she did. She lost to Zen not because she was not powerful enough, but because her understanding of the truth enlightenment was inferior to Zen. This fed her hunger to grow stronger, but naturally, her pride didn't let her ask Zen for the words directly. Thus, when she found out that Zen had family cultivating in the Dragon City, she arranged to have them brought to the Phoenix Palace. Her initial plan was to blackmail Zen into handing over his truth enlightenment by holding these women hostage. On the other hand, Nellie, Lavender and Laquisha all had a bad feeling about the arrangement in the first place. However, it turned out to be rather beneficial for them. The only disadvantage was Elvinia was difficult to get along with. They didn't even know her true identity until they asked a maid. After meeting the 3 girls, gradually, Elvinia grew to be almost fond of them. She even gave them several tips about cultivating. Once Zen finally understood what had really happened in the past few days, he sighed and waved his hand gently. Whoosh! A piece of rice paper materialized in his hand. "Fine, I have already shared 150 words of the truth enlightenment with several people. In fact, if you had asked Athamar or any of the other elders, you could have easily gotten it." Zen gently touched the scroll of rice paper, and it unfurled before him. Then, with a slight gesture, Zen produced an ink brush in his other hand. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. With quick and vigorous movements, Zen wrote down 180 words of the truth enlightenment. "I've only deciphered the last 30 words recently. No one knows about it. I'm giving this to you in exchange for teaching my girls," Zen said as he gently pushed the rice paper to fly towards Elvinia. Elvinia had been indifferent about everything her whole life. Her sole interest was to improve her cultivation, so she didn't mind taking the time to give Nellie, Laquisha and Lavender some tips. It also seemed as though she'd taken a liking towards teaching. Elvinia snatched the paper eagerly, gulping down every word Zen wrote down. After that, she carefully folded the rice paper. "Is there any more? If the truth enlightenment has been deciphered completely, it should be more than this." Zen chuckled. There was no way he was going to give it all to her in one go. "It's hard to decipher the rest. This is all." He paused, raising his eyebrow. "If they can successfully break through to the other shore, I might be able to decipher something by then." Elvinia knitted her brows, dubious as to whether Zen was speaking the truth. However, there was nothing she could do about it. In fact, she was already quite happy with the 180 words. As Zen waved goodbye to Nellie, Laquisha and Lavender, he gently reminded them to stay safe. Then, he turned to leave the fire-bearing hall. When Zen arrived at the door of the fire-bearing hall, he found Flamen there waiting for him. There seemed to be a concerned look on her face, as though she wanted to tell him something, but she hesitated. "Lady Flamen," he said, "do you have something to tell me?" Flamen, noticing Zen had come out alone, realized that the 3 women would be staying at the Phoenix Palace. It is true that cultivating in the Phoenix Palace is far better than that in the Dragon City. If they stay here, they will be treated as direct descendants of the Oneness Sky Palace, said Flamen cautiously. "Thank you, Lady Flamen," said Zen as he politely nodded his head. Flamen suddenly stretched out her hand and pressed a green jade token onto his palm. "This is the token of the Phoenix Palace. You must take it the next time you come here." Her eyes flashed seriously. "You were lucky to have entered the primitive illusion and emerged from it in one piece, but the next time, you won't be so lucky." Zen knew the guards would up their defense the next time he came here. If he were to visit the Phoenix Palace again, he knew that what Flamen said was true. Zen gratefully took the token and held it up to his eyes to observe it closely. Without a word, he stuffed it into his space ring. As Zen finally took his leave, Flamen called to him softly, "If you have the time, you should come here more often." She smiled mischievously. Zen waved, but couldn't help but feel a bit uneasy. He knew he was definitely going to come back sometime in the future, since the girls were cultivating here. But what did that have to do with Flamen? When Zen exited the gates of the Phoenix Palace, the dense, white mist of the primitive illusion ebbed away, giving him a path. The road before him seemed to be made of mist, soft as cotton. After flying along the road for a while, Zen arrived at the Cloudy Mountain Palace on the hillside. Zen was surprised to be met by 3 figures by a big stone that marked the front of the Cloudy Mountain Palace, an old man in black flanked by 2 young men. While Zen had passed by the Cloudy Mountain Palace several times before, he'd never seen them before. Chapter 2800, Invitation to Vastness Mountain. Zen headed straight towards the dragon path, ignoring the group of strangers. He was walking past the old man in black when one of the young men called out to him. "Pardon me, but are you Zen Luo?" Zen stopped, instantly alert. But he believed it was relatively safe here on Oneness Mountain, so he nodded. "Yes, I am." The young man smiled coldly at him. "Zen Luo, we'd like to extend you an invitation. Come with us to Vastness Mountain." At the mention of Vastness Mountain, Zen's eyes narrowed slightly. He said, matching the young man's cold tone, "No. I have no interest in going there." After he had killed Marco at Clear Lake, Zen had known that there would be retribution from Vastness Mountain. But despite what had happened between him and Marco, Zen was a disciple of the Oneness Sky Palace and an elite disciple of the Flow Sword sect. The Vastness Mountain would not dare to go openly against him. To get their revenge, they would have to operate in secrecy. He had not expected representatives of Vastness Mountain to be so bold as to wait for him at this place, in broad daylight. They must have known he would refuse their invitation. Zen had absolutely no intention of agreeing to go with them to Vastness Mountain. He decided not to engage these strangers any further. He turned away from the young man and started to walk away. The young man and his companion quickly moved forward, blocking his way. He faced Zen and said, still in that icy tone, "I'm afraid it's not up to you. Do you plan to try and force me? Do you want to fight me right now?" Zen said incredulously, speaking as loudly as possible. The Cloudy Mountain Palace was nearby and he wanted the palace to hear the trouble taking place. He believed Callum would not just stand by and watch. The old man in black heaved a sigh, and Zen turned back to look at him. The old man stared at Zen and said, "It seems you truly don't realize the gravity of what you did. We have every reason to kill you where you stand, without even engaging you in a fair fight. But as you can see, we are not here to kill you. We are only obeying orders." As he spoke, he released a strand of his aura, which quickly reached Zen. The aura did not seem particularly strong, so at first Zen was not worried. But as he perceived the aura and tried to resist it, he realized he couldn't. "This man is more powerful than I am," Zen thought, his eyes widening with astonishment. He decided his best course of action was to flee and take stock of the situation. But before he could choose between going to the Cloudy Mountain Palace or taking the Dragon Path, a gleaming circle of silvery light suddenly opened beneath his feet. There was a dark, ominous space in the depths of the silver circle. Zen instantly knew that something was wrong. As his one foot slipped into the hole, he attempted to push off from the ground with his other foot, trying to leap up and take flight. But the mysterious power in the dark space within the circle pulled on him, refusing to let him fly away. Zen lost his balance and fell into the darkness. It swallowed him instantly. As Zen vanished, the old man waved his hand gently, and a little golden monkey appeared above his head. The golden monkey emitted a strong, distinctive Other Shore power. It was obviously a living Other Shore token. The old man held out his hand and a few divine crystals appeared in his palm. The golden monkey crawled gently along his arm and grabbed the divine crystals from his hand, throwing them into its mouth and starting to gnaw with relish. "Put away the ring," the old man ordered. The small monkey squeaked in reply. In response to the monkey's squeak, the silver circle of light on the ground shrank and disappeared, leaving no trace that it had ever been there. No sooner had the circle vanished than a loud thud was heard from the Cloudy Mountain Palace nearby. The bang was deafening. Shadows emerged around the Cloudy Mountain Palace, which dissipated as Callum stepped out of the palace entrance. Callum ignored the young men and zeroed in on the old man in black, his expression thunderous. "Holden, how dare you engage in this kind of treacherous behavior? You go too far. How dare you abduct a disciple right here at Oneness Mountain?" Early that morning, Holden, the old man in black, had visited the Cloudy Mountain Palace with his 2 disciples. Holden was well known in many circles as a powerful warrior. While he did not have the reputation of Athamar and Goran, he was equally as strong as them. Callum had been bewildered by the sudden, unexpected visit. After all, there was rarely any communication between the Vastness Mountain and the Oneness Mountain. However, since Holden was a respected master, Callum welcomed them properly. Now he realized that Holden had been lurking here with his disciples for several days for only one reason, to abduct Zen. This deceit and abuse of his hospitality angered Callum greatly. As soon as Zen had arrived, Holden had set a magic array around the cloudy mountain palace which concealed their acts from the people inside the palace. Fortunately, Callum had noticed something wrong through the array plate of the dragon path. Otherwise Zen would have been taken away without anyone ever knowing what had happened. Holden remained imperturbable. You should know, that man killed the son of our mountain head. He deserves to be punished. I was ordered to take him to Vastness Mountain to ensure that justice is served. Calm down, Callum. Bring Zen back right now, and I will calm down, Callum snapped back, glaring at Holden. Like Sellers, Callum was a guide, although he was tasked with more important duties. In Oneness Mountain, he was in charge of the Dragon Path and part of the mountain protecting arrays. As a member of Oneness Mountain, Callum was aware of the close relationship between Zen and Athamar. He had vowed to do everything in his power to keep Zen safe, so there was no way he would let Holden just walk away after abducting Zen. Holden was not moved by Callum's anger. What if I can't do that? His words were accompanied by a squeak. It was his little monkey, who bared its teeth at Callum, trying to provoke him. The most precious and powerful of all other shore tokens took the form of living beings. Callum couldn't help but feel a twinge of fear at the sight of the small golden monkey. Holden saw his fear. He waved his hand at his two disciples, motioning for them to leave with him. He gazed solemnly at Callum and warned, "It was by the order of Gethin that I captured Zen. You shouldn't get involved in this matter. You'll just get yourself into trouble." With that, he and his disciples vanished from Callum's sight. Gethin is the head of the Vastness Mountain. Why would Zen kill his son? Callum muttered. He wondered anxiously what he should do next. Zen's excellent performance in the Dragon Path had greatly impressed Callum. He believed this young man was destined to be a new star in the Oneness Mountain. He was better than Milo. He couldn't understand how or why Zen would provoke such a serious conflict with the powerful Vastness Mountain. Holden was right, this matter exceeded Callum's authority. Callum thought it over and decided the best course of action was to report to Athamar as quickly as possible. Zen, meanwhile, had been shocked as he fell into the darkness. It was like dropping down an infinite abyss, without any light, without any hope of reaching the bottom. A mysterious force gripped Zen's body like an invisible shackle which prevented him from moving as he fell. It felt like he was trapped forever in the abyss. Zen wondered with some despair if it would ever end. Then abruptly, after about an hour had passed, a silver light flashed in his vision, and he felt a surge of relief. A circle of silvery light appeared once more below his feet. He slipped cleanly through the silver circle. There was a crashing sound as he landed somewhere. The dark space vanished behind Zen as he rolled onto a cold floor. He tried to get up. He could move again. Instantly he jumped up and glanced around him. He was in an unfamiliar, gloomy hall. The room was dark, and several people were already there, apparently waiting for him. Men in black robes flanked a woman who sat facing him. She was very beautiful, dressed all in red, but she was looking at Zen with deep hatred. Zen studied the woman. She had a red dot in the center of her eyebrows. Her eyes were full of bitterness and resentment as she stared back at Zen. Zen did not move or speak. Finally the woman broke the silence. "Was it you who killed my son?" she demanded, gnashing her teeth. Zen realized that this beautiful woman was Marco's mother. The Vastness Mountain knew that Zen had killed Marco almost as soon as it had happened. They immediately sent people to Clear Lake to capture Zen, but he was no longer there when they arrived. Zen himself had not stayed any longer at Clear Lake once he had killed Marco. He returned as soon as possible to Dragon City with Trish and Gant. The agents of Vastness Mountain had failed to intercept Marco's killer, but they quickly identified the killer as Zen. To abduct him, the Vastness Mountain sent Holden to wait for Zen on the only way into Oneness Mountain, right before the Dragon Path. As soon as he understood what this was all about, Zen calmed down. He collected his thoughts and met the eyes of the beautiful woman in red. "Yes, it was me.